Good evening, everyone. Welcome to a joint meeting with the Finance Committee and the Select Board for August 22nd, 2023. Tonight we're going to meet with the Community Preservation Committee and the Affordable Housing Trust. We're going to have an initial discussion between the boards for the FY25 budget. We'll have member input and public input, and the Finance Committee will stay late to take care of some minutes, and then we should be adjourning around 9, a little after 9 o'clock. With that, Gary, you have anything that you want?
No. Glad we could get together and do this. This is something I think we'll continue throughout the year as we have some of these bigger projects and challenges coming up. So appreciate you guys inviting us. Thank you.
Start with
You
the
invited us, but okay. Whatever.
It's your meeting, so.
Community
Tuesday, it's
Preservation Committee.
Oh, right, okay. Tuesday?
Carol?
Do we want to turn the thing on?
This? It's on.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we have a quorum also, we call meetings to order.
Okay. Did you want to have a presentation? Do you want us to start with some questions? How would you like to handle this?
You had questions for us.
I did.
Do you want to start with those?
Sure.
Did you have her come up so she's on her
Yeah.
Do I need to come up to the?
Yeah, why don't you come up with
own? Use the Alvin seat?
Alvin's seat?
You know, we'd have you come up to the podium, but somebody got
It was obstructive views. They paid just as much as everybody else.
Now, the problem is I have no juice. So I'm gonna have to- So I can get those questions. So I guess the big question is, of course, the 1% increase,
Yes.
or the attempt to get to 3% is what the what the goal was. As you know, we're a 1%.
You want this way? Okay.
A 1% community currently. So, with the number of projects that we know are coming, big projects, open space especially, the Webster property, that was what was introduced to us last year when just at the tail end of Anthony's tenure. And the thought was is if we could get more revenue into the Community Preservation Fund, we would have more revenue to put toward the Webster property. And I think that was really the impetus it came to us to ask us to, think about increasing to the 3%, which we've talked about over the years, whether we wanted, if we thought we were in a position yet to do that. So we, we seriously considered, and we've talked about it for about a year now. And I think what we've come to the conclusion is that we probably can't raise the surcharge to 3%. That's a 2% increase. I think the majority of the people that we spoke to they were not comfortable with that. So what we would like to do is raise the surcharge by 1%, so we'd be a 2% community, and then hopefully the town would commit to finding that 1%, which would be about $500,000 through, with the new marijuana HCA's. There are a number of vehicles that we can get to that. Increase to get the blended funds of that 1%. So at our last meeting, that's what we voted that we would like to go through with, is to increase the surcharge to 2%, so that would be a 1% increase, and then try to get, town commitment for the other 1%.
And is it just this Webster property that you're looking at? Anyway?
No, the tennis courts came to us also this year, and that was $734,000. We haven't yet voted on that. We're still waiting for some information from Park and Rec. But that would be another project. We'll probably end up bonding it, but we can only bond half. So we have approximately $824,000 in the recreation bucket. So if
So
we,
Alicia came to see me the other day, I was in town hall. She's had a misunderstanding with that half.
oh, okay,
It's the bond the contractor puts up is for half the project. But the town can bond 100% of
The whole thing,
of the
okay.
thing, yes. So you can pay the debt service out of the fund.
but still, $734,000. So, you know, we'd end up paying on that probably over 20 years. So there's, right away, you have an amount that every year you have to fund. And we have that now with open space and historic, where there's already, you know, money off the top that we can't spend because we need to pay down that debt service. So, you know, there's always talk about playing fields and, you know, all sorts of things. So if we could have more money in the community preservation account, the more we could do. And of course, the big thing is the state match. If we can get up to that 3%, we get the full state match, which last year was 32%. This year may be lower, but still it's more than we'll ever get on any investments.
So, excuse me, what is the difference between the match at 1% and the match at 2% and then the match at 3%? Do you have that?
We've got about it was about a 30% match, but if you go up, it's another, I think it was like 48%. I think we would have gotten another like $50,000 on top of what we would have gotten last year. So it's not a lot.
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify,
Thank you.
the state has multiple pools of distributions. If you're not at 3%, you're only eligible for the first distribution.
Right.
If you are you reaching that 3%, then you are eligible for the second and third rounds of distribution. I think last year, as Ron said, it added 10 or 15%. So it's a not insignificant amount of money to be at that 3% tier. It does vary from year to year.
So I'll add on, one of the things that we talk about is one of our goals is looking for as properties become, you know, on the market that we're for potentially preserving for the town. We have no revenue source for them, and we're always scrambling. If we would want to buy a property like the Webster property or any other property in town, we don't have a fund where we can say there's enough money or an idea that we could afford this. So the select board actually talked about two goals. One was to figure out how to fund these things going forward, CPC is one, and the other is to go through and like start prioritizing and figuring out what properties we would like to acquire. We haven't, it's not a goal for this year per se to take that too far. I think we have to wait for like the open space plan to come out and things like that and see where the CPC goes, see what we have. But personally, I support like the 3% and trying to find another source to match the 1% that the town would have. We looked at one point, like whether the cannabis surcharge would help. It doesn't. It would help offset it as revenue that we don't necessarily have allocated, but it doesn't. It's not 1%, right? We'd have to find other sources. So. And if you go back to when Keith was here, we used some percentage of new growth was going in to do the blended to match. And then, you know, Keith left and the economy went downhill and then we never went back to that model, so.
We had a lot of funds coming through the work from the planning board as developments came in. Those funds were earmarked for CPC when Keith was here, yes.
I'm curious, can you tell me what the debt service is now? You said you had open space and recreation debt service from the 1%?
Yeah, so we have historic debt service on the Houghton building roof. And then there's 3 properties, the Yap, the Cobb, and the Williams property all have debt service. Let's see, the debt service for the open space is about $59,000 last year, and the Houghton building was about $10,650. Of course, that'll go down.
So like 10 or 12% of the total is, okay. Thanks.
Got a question. If we go to 2% or 3%, is that permanent, or is that going to be one time to do these things that you're looking to do? And then the second part of that is, if we do go to a different percentage, or even with the 1% that we have now, if you want to use that money, do you have to go to the town for a vote to use that money, or can you guys go ahead and purchase something using the fund?
So first, it's permanent until you change it. You can always roll back, we could always go forward.
Town vote can pull it back.
Yeah, it's just within, up to the 3%. So it will stay there until we change it again. And then on the second part, no, the CPC is like we vet the projects. We go through and make sure that they're eligible for CPC funds. And what we do is recommend to town meeting. So we would recommend anything to the town meeting, and it's the residents that vote on
They
the
would
projects.
vote before it gets used, okay. I guess one more question, is like over the last 3 to 5 years, how much more money is going into the fund? Because like, for example, the assessed value of my house has gone up astronomically, and I'm paying a lot more in taxes, over 10% just in the last year. And how much of that money is going to how much more, if you look 5 years ago, how much was going in, and if you look now, how much is going in compared to what you had 3 to 5 years ago?
Okay, so going back 5 years, there's blended funds in there, so I'm not going to use that one, but in 2019, it was 349,000. 2020 was 329,000. 2021 was 347, and 2022 was 362. It's relatively stable.
It might be the difference between the commercial revenue and the residential revenue when IBM dropped off.
Yeah, because my taxes went up a lot higher than what you just rattled off.
Part of it was because of IBM.
Right. The calculation for the CPA is based on value alone. So you're right, as value goes up, this piece goes up. So it's the value of your house less 100,000. And take 1% of that, and that's what the surcharge is that you pay. So you start to equate that number that the town's bringing in, and in FY23, it's probably closer to 400,000. It's like 399,000 that we put out on tax bills for 23. Values, I can tell you from the classification hearing last November, our chief assessor said values for this year are going to go up another 20%, which means the CPA surcharge would go up 20%. So it's totally based on value.
Yeah, so depending on the house, I mean, that could be like another mortgage payment.
Not for the CPA funds.
Not for CPA, but
So-
for
Total,
Yeah.
it's
It's the small.
It's the assessed
Well, I
value, right?
did run,
Yes.
these have the assessed value of your house and then what the CPA surcharge would be at
Yeah,
1,
maybe
2, and 3%.
Yeah.
Where'd we go? If I could ask a question while Barbara looking at this, one of the things that I've always been a little unclear about is, I tend to view that, each year, we have a bucket of money to spend, and we go through our vetting of, which projects, which capital items, and so on and so on. And CPA does a somewhat independent vetting of their projects, and I've always been a little unclear. It's like, if we decide we need another football field, it's like, okay, how do we decide whether that's something that we in the general budget should handle or CPA should handle? And so I'm just a little unclear. Just not so much the regulations, but just where do we feel about that? Because we do our vetting. I mean, the two vetting processes are completely independent, and that seems, I don't know.
And then the ultimate vetting process is the voter. Because once they bring it forward to a warrant, the residents vote for it or against it.
Right.
I think,
That's one thing that we've discussed.
Well, so, yeah, so one thing, if I stumbled across, there is actually a CPA appendix to the Fincom policies. And it seems to imply, and I have no idea if this has ever actually happened, that the CPC and the Fincom and the Select Board should actually be working much closer to, as you say, to work through the budget and figure out what projects are, can be applied to CPA and, or can be funded through CPA. So, you know, I don't know if that happened at some point in the past and in the, you know, pandemic crash, whatever, we dropped that activity, or if it never happened, but that's,
Because I think we should, because I mean, if we're looking at 12 projects and we're saying, okay, we think we can fund, you know, 8 of them, and maybe you're looking at 5 projects, and you think you can fund 4. Well, I still want to compare our project number 8 against your project number 4, because I don't know off the top of my head which one, you know, which one to the town might be more valuable. And right now, I think we lose that comparison.
yeah, I think, Brian, I think that this is definitely one of the reasons why I wanted this group to get together tonight. I think we can do more of this, and probably at least beginning of the year when we're talking about this type of thing, but also when we're getting into the meat of the budget season and we're crunching numbers on projects. And all right, well, that's when we need to probably have more meetings. But you know, I'm not averse to saying quarterly, to have CPC at least talking at the table when we're during budget season, when we're talking projects. I think it's necessary when we're,
Right.
it's fiscally responsible to do that.
Right. I was thinking, especially if the proposal is that we go to 2, and then every year we ask this group to sort of find the money equivalent to the other 1%.
Well, I think one of the things too was before, we didn't have enough money to fund a football field. You know, the revenue has built up a little bit over the past few years, but it's kind of like, you know, we've talked about this, is if we do it this way, to get that state match, to get more money, some of those projects that we've been funding through the general fund could then come through CPA. So we haven't done that in the past, but maybe that's something that we could go to if we have more money.
Yeah, right. It seems to make sense, right? As long as we can get, like,
Yeah.
because every year we have to decide things we don't fund, right? So if we can justify, okay, you know, here's things that we haven't been able to fund out of capital, you know, without override or whatever, but we can fund through CPA and take advantage of a match, right?
Kind of filter it through CPA to get that extra, I mean, if we're getting another $50,000, that, I mean, that paid for the OSSD feasibility right there. You know, it's like free money from the state. You know, some of these debt service would get paid, you know, with the money from the state,
Right.
but we would have more to do a project like you say.
And it's
Right.
policy, so.
And it's about, yeah.
So I actually looked through last year's budget, and we actually talked about this a bit, like there were a couple projects that could have been funded through the CPA, which were the irrigation wells we put in, could potentially have been funneled through there rather than through the general fund.
Right, which, and this is probably sort of a heretical idea, but let me just toss it out as a thought experiment, and you can tell me why this doesn't make sense. But one could imagine, so right now we're saying, we're proposing, put it to 2, and then every year we try to find the 1, knowing that if we can funnel the money through, we get more money back. What's to stop us from saying, leave it at 1, and as a policy, every year we try to find the 2, we try to find as many projects as possible. You know, start the slings and arrows, I get it, but we have a policy that we try to, you know, pick as many of these projects that make sense and funnel the money through the process, because that makes us more. I'm just wondering if that's more palatable to the town, saying, when we can, we will do this because it will save money, as opposed to with a whole bunch of big projects coming down the pike, we're going to do a tax increase and look for some more. I know that's, you know, I'm going to cover my...
Yeah, I don't know if it's realistic. That's the problem. I think that some of the projects we're talking about, it takes commitment, and we're talking commitment from the town. And then the way that you're speaking to it is you're talking a commitment to the boards that move out every couple of years, different board members come in and things change. So you'd have to really embed it in the policies, and they would be very, very painful for, I want to go with a decade, because money right now is baked in. Everything, we know it's coming in, and we know we've assigned the dollars pretty much. We're talking, it's outside capital, I think. And so when we start tinkering with money, we talk about the marijuana tax. Well, the stuff we're already getting is already baked into our budget and paying for things, and our increase in our salary through our employees and everything, of course, everything else. So we have to be very careful on what's that span of time where we'd have to look at to get to what you're talking about. I think it would be, I don't see how we could do it.
But it's macro and micro, right? It's macro. So what keeps us the TA, we found the money. We got the full match for years. And it was less burden on the residents. So that's the microeconomics of it, the resident. The macroeconomics is we have to find the money. The microeconomics is the residents to find the money. Right? So we have to decide whether or not we want to. It's for an average house in Littleton, it's $82 at 1%, it's $164 at 2%, and it's $247 at 3%. So it's basically $85 for each percentage we go up. And we had conversations about giving away trash bags because some residents weren't able to afford the trash bags. So we need to be mindful of that burden on folks as well. To Alvin's point, everybody's taxes have gone up. Some certainly larger percentage than others, but there is a point at which we have to pump the brakes. And if we can't get the full match, we can't get the full match. And it's unfortunate. One of our goals is to be proactive, to try to squirrel some money away so that we have the opportunity and not be reactive, be proactive, put some money away so that when property X comes up and we've always had our eye on it and we don't want it to be developed, we're able to jump on.
I think one of the reasons to go to 2% is to build up that reserve, rather than saying as a policy we're going to just try to spend up to 2%. But we could say as a policy, let's try to spend up to 3%. If we're $100,000 short of the 3% and we can find $100,000 in projects that can be funneled through the CPC and that we're going to do anyway, that ends up getting us to the 3% match. That's like free money for the town, or a 40% discount on the project, whichever way you want to look at it. And I realize it's bookkeeping to some extent, but 3% to the state is 3% to the state, and they don't know whether we, put the money through the CPC or we were going to spend it on irrigation anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
The part-
That's what I'm,
The part that I'm just getting at is finding the 2 to 3 each year. Oh yeah, we can do that. But we're willing to tackle that. But going from the 1 to 3, oh my God, that's impossible. That's where I get a little troubled. And to Chuck's point about proactive, I look down the road at the capital projects we've got coming and Shaker I'm hearing numbers like 50 million. It's so it's proactive about what's the increases that are going, and that's totally it's got to be outside limit. Know that. So
Well, I think one of the things I'm struggling with is probably the wrong word, but I think one of the things we really have to articulate to the town, right? Every year we're, as boards, Fincom, select board, we're making decisions on things we don't fund that we could fund with 2%, whether it's part of CPC or not. So really being solid on here's the benefit of funding it this way, and here's some of the costs within the budget it potentially is going to offset, right? I think will make a difference, right? Versus just, it's a little fuzzy to me, just not knowing for sure what redirecting that money or what those conscious decisions of what we're going to pull in from CPC that'll offset some of the spending we haven't made in the past, right? Because we haven't gone to the town and asked for an override to fund the underfunded capital plan, for example, right? Or so I think we really want to make sure we're being strategic in how this money is going to start to offset things that we haven't been able to fund in the past, right? I know getting the state match is great, but I think CPC's done an awesome job what they have of funding projects to date, right? So if there's things that we're going to start to either pull in that haven't been funded or aspirationally buy things that we haven't been able to in the past. I think we just need to be able to push that plan into the town, right?
I mean, we keep talking, it's all taxpayer money
Yeah.
at the end of the day. So when I look at it that way, personally, I'm thinking, okay, well, if we get a commitment from townspeople that it's going into this, well, that limits, there's buckets, and there's a use. So you're basically saying to the voter, these are the things that this money can be used on. This is what we put our value in and what we think that your money could be best spent on, as opposed to leaving it up to the boards, for all these other projects, knowing your tax is going to keep going up. Whether we do it this way, if you were to go rip the Band-Aid off and go 3% and see what happens, and then you've got money gets matched, which is significant. And the reason why, and I know it's not a popular decision, the 3%, because it's a big jump, but if you think about your own personal income and you were to invest that money at X percent, you'd be crazy not to do it. So I get to leave it up to the rest of the board's finance committee. We'd have to really bake it into the policy. And like I said, I think it would be a far-reaching goal where we would be this real erratic, because some years we absolutely can't do it, as opposed to it's already baked in, we know the money's there, and now we talk about the real stuff of what we're going to spend those projects on with CPC. So
Right, but the thing is, my financial advisor has for years saying, Brian, you should save more in your 401k. It's like, yeah, tell Donalds that I should have more money to put in my 401k. Right. There's smart things that I should do that I can't.
One of the things that is always just stuck in the back of my head, and Brian brought the point up, is what's going to happen with Shaker Lane. And right now, that's a big unknown. Whether it's going to be a rehab, whether it's going to be a new building. If it's a new building, that's a huge price tag. And we're going to be asking the townspeople to put up a lot of money outside of the levy for this. And at least that's our intention here.
Yeah.
It
Absolutely.
has to be an exclusion item. There's no way we can support that. So to increase this piece of the puzzle now, it's just going to increase that burden later on. And we have people, you just mentioned, just before this meeting, we have people struggling to pay the taxes down. And we're going to put an extra burden on them in this way. My suggestion, we have a financial policy, CPC is part of that policy, the CPA policy. We could take a piece of that free cash calculation that we do, that puts money to capital stabilization, puts money to regular stabilization, and put something in for a deposit into this fund. It may not be the full 1%, may not get us to 3%, but it's going to get us something. And something at 30% interest is better than nothing at 30% interest. I'm not saying that we can put the whole 400,000 in there, but we can try. But as somebody else mentioned, there are a lot of projects coming down the pike for capital expenses. And we got to balance a limited number of funds into all these little buckets that we have. Trying to put it this way, $400,000, I did the calculation the other day, $400,000, just say was an increase to the levy for that we're asking the people to pay. That's 40, if we're going to equate it to a tax rate, that's 44 cents on the tax rate. We're struggling now with the debt exclusion stabilization account. We're feeling good that we're giving back the taxpayer 17 cents. Every year, we're doing enough to get back 17 cents, and then we're going to tax them another 44 cents on top of that. Why are we even taking the 17 cents away? Let's take that stabilization money and use it for something else. I mean, these are the options that we have. I don't like doing that because we made a commitment to keep that exclusion number down until something else comes along. But something's got to give, and if it's a choice of giving up the 17 to save the 44, I'd rather give up the 17 than to save the 44.
I just think the end goal here, we're looking at, I would have to assume anyone would agree, in a perfect world, it would make sense to fund this. All things considered, just because it's a ridiculous percentage rate on your return.
Sure.
There's a ton of projects that we don't even talk about. We can talk about the orchard. These are very important projects to the town. Tennis courts, Indian Hill. All these are projects that CPC funds could be used for. So when we're talking about the school, I hate kicking a ball down the road knowing that these projects are never going to stop. I know someone, we talked about it earlier, in the February special town meeting said, when does it all end?
Never.
And the town moderator said, it never ends. And there's truth to that, an absolute truth to it. We're going to always need new schools and new fire departments and new roofs. And so somehow I wanted to find a way to get to that end point where we're doing the smart thing, which I think we could all agree in a perfect world is to get to that 3% and get this big return on our investment. And that's the discussion that I really wanted to have. Let's have a roadmap to it. But to say 1 year we're going to kick in 1 year we're going to kick in maybe 2, we're going to be just short of 2 or 3. It's just not a plan for me. That's why I'm uncomfortable with it. But I mean, if the boards believe that that's a way to go, then I just don't think that's really a commitment to the CPA.
Well, Gary, one thing that might be, sorry.
No, go ahead, finish.
I mean, one thing that might be a good exercise is to take, I mean, we've done a good job of having a 10-year cap plan the last couple of years, taking that and saying, okay, here's things that actually could be funded via that match. And then it's concrete, right? Then we're saying, okay, here's costs that we, really can leverage these funds versus just the more is better philosophy, right?
I think we do that, Tyler. I mean, the example was made of, I think we may have to discuss offline whether or not it's an eligible project, but even that was a small dollar project. So we always, in terms of the funding of looking at what comes in, we know that like last year's 1.7 million available, and then, we tried to front load anything that was CPA related. We always do that. So.
Yeah, during our budget process for sure, but just looking at it like holistically, okay, of the 50 million or 100 million in the cap plan, we can offset 20 million of that through CPC or something, just a little more forward-looking. Right?
So I fully think we need to be at 3% to get the free money. Looking through the budget and the process we went through last year, I don't see any way we're going to come up with the 2% in the town budget in anywhere in the foreseeable future, right? There's a potential that we can, through smart policies and whatever, come up with a 1% and raise it 1%. As to the burden that we're putting on residents, there's a lot more exceptions that people can apply for CPA relief than there is for anything else. There's all kinds of low income, not just senior exceptions, but
It's on the bottom of your
exceptions
page that I handed out.
that people can apply for. So yes, it will be a burden, but people can apply to get some of that burden relieved. So as opposed to when we build a school, there's no relief anyone's going to get, right? So
There are 9 people. There's 9 people currently enrolled in the
Yes.
CPA.
Right. So I don't think we're doing a good enough job of advertising.
Which is why we have the other committee there.
that it's there, right? Yeah, but
So my concern, so don't listen to me with my calculations. Fred educated me on how to calculate it now, so it makes a lot more sense to me. I understand it much better. And my concerns, I think, were just addressed, but with the calculation now, the way that I see it, I think that looks a lot more reasonable. Hearing about the match makes sense. I think the one thing we do need is what are the projects that would fall underneath this? So what's the plan for the next X number of years on what we would use this money for, just like we were doing a capital plan? And then what you said is, I was going to say that too, is there are exceptions where you can go and you can file for something. So I came out sounding like I wasn't for it, and I wasn't, but now the calculation is much better. So I think I understand this a little better.
Well, one thing, like the project start with the board and move that way to CPC, right? They don't start there and come up here, right?
Right, goals and policy and whatever the select board at that given time, I mean, things obviously present themselves. We have a roadmap of things we know that are going to happen. And then we have a roadmap of the surprise things that kind of fall in your laps. And those, I think a fund like CPC helps with those things more it definitely helps with long-term planning, but we can, and you absolutely need to be at the table a lot more. And I don't know where that stopped happening and why that wasn't, that this great resource is not literally in all of our discussions, in our budget discussions, right?
Right, anytime we talk about capital.
So, I'm curious, who at this table can tell me how the town, without the taxpayers, can get to 1% right now? Where, I just don't see it. We're sitting here looking at a budget, I don't see where you're going to say, we're going to commit to 1% from what? We can talk about marijuana, well,
Marijuana is about a quarter of a percent.
right, it's not even close to what we're trying to get.
You have to spend.
And some of it's already existing, so it's already baked into our current budget. Now, the new establishment, God willing, that it actually comes in, we can start talking about that. Okay, well, let's start using that revenue. That becomes a discussion, obviously. So I
think, Gary, the most likely possibility is what Steve outlined, which is then, the Finance Committee reconsidering their policies in terms of where those reserves are then dedicated, and then and probably do it that way. That's the most predictable way to get as much into it as you could, but there's a trade-off on that, too.
I mean, can we get a commitment to get to 3%, I guess, is where I want to end up at the end of the day. I think we all would like to get there, and we're all uncomfortable with both ways to get there, right? At the end of the day, I think the voters have to vote. I mean, that's, it's hard,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess you had alluded to the fact that there were things in our budget that we've done that could have been used with CPA funds. So isn't that in a sense where the town can come up with another percent? Because there's things that we're spending money on that we don't have to be, because they could be, I don't know dollar for dollar how that equates, but there's certainly something there.
I think Ryan was saying,
Yeah, I mean,
They vet everything.
we anything we can push to the CPC, we do, because better to use those funds with the match than it would be.
We talked about some specific things that we could have used it for. that we
Well,
didn't
yeah,
in the budget.
but you have to kind of get down to the details. Again, I don't want to debate whether, what can be used, but the CPC is very specific about what those things are. And they're more limited and they're unique because that's the way the program's structured. It's structured to set monies aside for projects the town might not otherwise be oriented to, like affordable housing or historic restoration, which, if the board was trying to compare those things to a new school, it's going to come in lower, frankly. So, I think we're always looking at that, Jerry. And I think just as a matter of context, and just keep in mind, like we talked about the tennis court project, and that we have to go out and at 1%, we have to go out and get that via debt, because otherwise they would expend all the monies in the recreation bucket. So just keep in mind, we could talk about what it, what that, and that's taken years to accumulate. So.
Right. Well, Caroline mentioned with the feasibility study and the irrigation was mentioned. So I mean, there are things that we're spending money on. So that 1% the town would have to come up with maybe isn't quite 1%. And then if we did do the full 3% and more people were able to get out, based on these hardship needs, then that's actually less money getting matched, where if the town is putting in that 1%, it's a full 1% getting matched.
I still go back to like the tennis courts. Part of me is like, why isn't that park and rec for the schools?
Yeah.
But
so Brian, I think the answer to that is we only, say in this case for the FY24 budget, we knew we've got 1.7 million. So if we were to devote, I think the number was it 734,000? I think was the number. So there's that's a good portion of the entire if we spend in cash up front on that. So which we may or may not do. So it's a matter of scope, because these capital projects that come up are larger scale, and so funding it via debt service via the CPC is an option, but at 1%, you're not going to be able to just do something and spend a ton of money, because the buckets are only so big.
I mean, we're talking about in this town especially, land purchase is really, when people think of CPC to some degree, they think of the land purchase. We talked about the Webster property, but we can talk about any property down the road that comes available that the town wants right of first refusal on, or they want to purchase outright because of, we keep hearing we don't have the open space in most communities. We can go down a list of reasons, but this town's been very committed to buying land when it becomes available. So it's a lot harder, I think, on the taxpayer when we have to knee-jerk that decision because we don't have money to just do it out of a CPC bucket or we've put into it, it's been invested, and it's grown on its own. And that worries me a little bit because that's not ever going to stop until we run out of land, of course. But what is that next property that becomes available? We're like, ugh, what are we going to do?
So a good question is, what was the last property we bought that didn't use CPC funds? And it probably, I doubt we have bought one since there was the CPC.
You know, let's look at the orchard. You know, Karen and I are working on that. We're going to have to spend money on it. There's no doubt about it. In order to maintain the property and keep us from it falling into ruin or even losing more money. We can use CPC funds. We can raise the taxpayers are going to pay for it one or the other. If we use CPC funds, at least they get the discount of having the state match as part of that bucket. So for that reason, I would be in favor of increasing to 2% because it's always going to get used. And I think in general, in fact, always, what we use it for is very worthwhile for the town. And it's things that the residents are asking for, like purchasing open space and, you know, maintaining the orchard or other places in town that are historical or special.
So to build on Gary's point, we did hear a lot of frustration in past town meetings about the last minute nature of trying to fund these projects. Folks expressed that they don't like having to make this decision last minute. They don't like it being decided by 80 people, you know, at the last minute versus, you know, a planned process. So I think we need to respect that as well, that, you know, this is a frustration that's been communicated to us by the residents. They don't want to fund things this way with a last minute special meeting.
Absolutely.
Once funds are in a bucket, out of the 5 buckets, is there an opportunity to take some funds from historical or housing to put it to recreation or open space?
You have to vote on it at town meeting.
And
You can do that.
Are you limited to a percentage, though, every year you can shift from one bucket to another? Or is it?
Yeah, whatever.
I think there are minimums for each bucket, but
Going in, but.
There's a minimum donation.
There's minimum going in of
minimum
10%.
going in, But I think
The balance, there's no, I don't believe
because you
there's a
don't have to
minimum
have any
balance.
specific balance in a bucket.
No.
So at any given year, when a plot of land becomes available, we don't have the money in this bucket, we could move it from another if there was there to
Right, and there is
potentially make that
an undesignated bucket, which
Right.
we've been trying to fund like with the state match. Before, we weren't funding it. That's where like a lot of the interest and stuff gets put in there. So we've been funding that, so that's about $305,000. So we have done that in the past, like if there's any of I think the Williams property, we might have funded out of the open space and undesignated. So that gives you a little more flexibility in the undesignated bucket.
And do you-
So, to Steve's question, how much money is in the CPC buckets now, total?
This is based on my calculation
Yeah,
from what I've
ballpark,
gotten
not
before,
too-
is about 2.5,
About $2.5 million sitting in there.
yeah.
And that's after you basically emptied the housing bucket
Yep,
and it went to the, whatever the.
Affordable
other-
Housing
right,
Trust.
so
Yeah,
there's-
that would have been at the end of the fiscal year.
And that,
Again, that's my
yeah,
calculations.
ballpark, that was
Ballpark.
about $1 million? Okay, so,
Yeah,
you know, it's not chump change sitting there, even at the 1%. So maybe we aren't as astute as we should be as how we've been using it, but, you know, it's $3.5 million in those 3 buckets sitting there.
I know we're going to get to Anna with the Affordable Housing Trust, but why do 100% of the funds that go into the housing bucket get transferred to the Housing Trust?
Well, that was what the Housing Trust, when that fund was created, that's how they wanted to fund it. And we ask them every year, are you sure you want all that money to go? You know, you don't,
Sure.
I know it, like Pine Tree, when they were doing a lot of the emergency renovations that had to be
renovations, right,
done. But then they were able to get a lot of that through the state, so they didn't need the bucket as much. It's about 25,000 is left in there if they needed, you know, sinks or whatever they needed up at Pine Tree. But they wanted the money to be able to do the rental program, the vouchers, and then was it the Foster Street property that they make at the Tehadawin Road property that they will build. They wanted to be in control of those funds to be able to spend them without having to go back to town meeting too, because it's a little more nimble. And that's what we've been doing the last, 3 or 4 years.
So it's good that I think that we're all meeting here, so we can hear what the Affordable Trust
Yes, because that
Committee
comes up all the time.
has on the plate.
Yeah.
Maybe that there's a point in time where, and I don't know what their plans are right now, they have enough money, we can keep it into the housing bucket in the CPC and then transfer those monies as we need it to possibly open space. I mean, that's $1 million that's sitting with the Affordable Housing Trust right now.
Well, you're funding something, the Affordable Housing Trust, to its maximum, correct? Basically, the request is always fulfilled or not?
It has been.
I'm just like, in other words, we shortfall. We can't buy enough land. We don't have money to buy land because. But the discussion with Affordable Housing Trust is you're going to get X amount of money that you ask for every year. How is that conversation happening where that money automatically goes to?
Maybe I shouldn't have said automatically. They apply every year for that money. And we ask, is there anything else that you're going to want to fund in your bucket? And the answer is no. So we usually recommend that to town meeting and it gets voted through.
And the funds are often payments in lieu from developers, which are designated for housing. It's not like, I don't think, Maren, you actually can tell us exactly.
So I think there's about just under $500,000 that's been given to the town for affordable housing by developers, by the sale of Cooper, that kind of thing. Most of it is being routed through CPC and then back to Affordable Housing Trust. Then the CPC and Affordable Housing Trust have come up with a percentage of CPC funds that go to Affordable Housing Trust every year. It's maybe, 10%?
So about, I think we've been doing 20%.
Okay, thank you.
20% of the revenue.
Some communities say, 40% would go to affordable housing. It's, that's the town's decision to make on that.
But one of the reasons it's so big is those payments that are designated for housing, we put them through the CPC because we get the match.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's a pass-through.
I guess that's a technical question I had on that. So how long does money have to sit in the CPC for it to get the match, or is it
it's whatever,
as soon as it's voted?
Whatever revenue you get within the year. So at the end of the year, they take whatever revenue you got the last year, and that's what they apply the match to.
So no matter when you spend, you could spend it immediately.
Right, or you could let it sit forever.
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have anyone from the Affordable Housing Trust just talk about the project? I mean, a lot of people might not know what you're doing and where your money is spent. And
well, I'm happy to come up and talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, please.
Okay, terrific. Well, Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum, and we can borrow 2 of your members.
Okay. Okay.
Hi.
And so, Carolyn, were you going to stay there? Or?
I don't know. Am I all done? Am I dismissed?
Maybe stay there.
Yeah, we'll keep you in the hot seat for
And Mara, why don't you come on over, because I'm sure you're going to be answering some questions as well. So, before I get started, I just wanted to ask, did everybody get the handouts emailed to you?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. And then we have a slight update, so those can go to the folks over here. Have a slight update on a couple of sentences, if you want to just pass that out. So to answer your questions, specifically. I'm just going to go through those and then help address any questions that you might have. So one of your questions was the annual spending and any projects being funded. So if you took a look at the spreadsheet that was provided, one spreadsheet was around detail, and it provides all of the sources of income for the Affordable Housing Trust, then the expenses. And so with respect to the annual spending, it has been primarily around rent assistance, rental and mortgage assistance, so LRAP, ERAP, and EMAP. And then a couple of other payments that have gone out to the project at Tehadawon Road, and Matthew can speak to that a little bit more, for engineering, and $200,000 as well that was all approved at town meeting. And then there's some fees in there for consultants. So the expenses that have happened so far have been just in those particular areas. We do have a couple of other projects that are teed up that we would like to continue to work with the town, work with the developers to determine what to do on those. So the projects that I'm speaking of were in this table. So when you got your email, this particular table identified the different projects related to affordable housing in Littleton. One of those projects being the Durkee Farmhouse. And so right now we're waiting for town council to be able to obtain the lien certificate, run title. And so Maren and I are talking with town council on Thursday afternoon to continue to move that forward, because there could be the possibility of affordable housing units within the farmhouse in the barn. Okay, but we still have to get through that process of actually acquiring the property. The other one is the parcel at Tehadawon Road, and we're waiting for a revised RFP. Is that correct, Matthew?
That's correct.
All right. And once we have that RFP,
So that's going to be a Habitat for Humanity house. With an eye towards, sort of leveraging the funds that we have, the bottleneck for Habitat is hiring construction managers, because they tend to be good at getting donations of materials, but they have a hard time they have to pay for someone to run the site. So I have been discussing with the Habitat for our region. We are going to give them the parcel, the buildable parcel that was part of the Brown property, which was designated for affordable, and pay for the construction manager to construct a affordable duplex Habitat house on that site. And I think the overall payment was in the neighborhood of $50,000. And so we saw that as a way of getting a affordable duplex for $50,000. And the rest of the money would be covered by Habitat with donations and sweat equity and all the other things that Habitat does.
Talk to me about preference for Littleton residents, the current Littleton existing inhabitants. Do they have any
I know
priority on that list for any of this?
I don't know, but I know that the first Habitat house that we built, I believe, did go to a Littleton resident. So,
all right, can you talk about the process?
Federal fair housing laws prohibit a lot of local preference.
Even if we own the property?
we will sell it. We will sell it to them, and we'll sell them the property anyway.
In this case, I was just curious. In other cases,
Littleton preference is usually can be up to 70% of the units, depending.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that I think would be really helpful for us to get some additional expertise in talking with some consultants to determine, what is the smartest thing that we can do as a town to be able to go through this process with any outside partner, be it Habitat or somebody else. The third project that's on this table, I just wanted to mention briefly, is Dean Lane, or at Cooper Farm. There is a lot that is still intended to be for an affordable housing unit, and so the Affordable Housing Trust is supporting the planning board in its negotiations with the developer to determine, in addition to acquiring the land, what's going to happen with respect to them actually building the house or donating money so the house can be built. At this moment, a house to be built, just a small house, is probably well over $300,000. And so from that standpoint, the planning board then will need to take a look at how to best negotiate that particular final parcel. But again, depending on that, the Affordable Housing Trust might have a role in then being able to work with consultants and developer to be able to get that house built. So that's your one question. So the funds currently in the Affordable Housing Trust, at a macro level, there's 1.2 million that has come into the trust since its inception. 354,000 has been spent thus far, as I mentioned, on Tehadawon and the rental and mortgage assistance programs. And then leaving currently about $900,000. And there's still about another $113,000 in the pipeline. And so all total, sounds like a big amount of money, right? Large amount of money, over $1 million potentially. But again, keeping in mind what I said about what it costs to actually build a home. So we want to be really smart about that money. And that leads to the third question you asked about future plans and projects. So with those three that I mentioned, Durkee, Tehadawon, and Dean Lane, that could very well consume that funding, right? One of the things that that we had talked about as a trust last year was creating an action plan and being able to then work with some consultants to, again, identify what are the smartest ways to go about doing this. We have not been able to work on that action plan in part due to staffing. I mean, Marin staffs the work, but again, her plate is so overflowing that she's got extensions to her plate, right? So we need to make sure that if we do fortunately get a new assistant town planner, that that person can assist, or Marin can move stuff around, but we need assistance so that we can actually move forward on that action plan.
And how predictable is some of this funding that you request? I mean, is it, when we're talking rental assistance, especially for low-to residents, is it a predictable number that you guys know every year, roughly? Has it gone up a lot? Does it go down? Does it fluctuate?
So the Affordable Housing Trust has designated up to 20 slots.
Okay, so you have a little cap.
Per year.
And a budget cap of $60,000.
Yeah, budget cap. And they would vote that every year depending on expected income. The other side of that is any mitigation payments that have come from various developers. That is so unpredictable, and we certainly haven't seen the level of development recently, the past couple of years. So I don't anticipate that'll stay.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
I mean, given that there's the limits, have you been hitting the limits? Because the LRAP and ERAP, oh my God, amazing programs. I'm actually surprised that the numbers that have been spent haven't been higher.
A lot of the, during COVID, when there were ARPA funds and other emergency funds available, some of those were able to pay for the programs for a period there.
But so are we, with the budget cap, I mean, do we have people who are applying that you're having to say no to?
No. I think we've rejected one for the first time, but it was for cause, not because we didn't have funds.
Yeah, and we're at, what, 15?
Or 17, yeah, 16 or,
16.
yeah, something like that.
Households right now, slots for 20.
Okay, great. That makes me feel really good, because that's community preservation as well.
Pretty much everyone who's asked for one and everyone who's asked for assistance has gotten it with one.
Excellent.
So with one exception.
Sure.
So to the big picture.
And do they get what they ask for, or do they get some percentage of what they ask for, or how does that work?
Well, they get qualified by EHS. The application is through their department, and they apply
then bring them forward to Affordable Housing Trust if they're qualified.
Okay, so it's
So if they don't qualify for.
it's pre-vetted before it comes to the trust, okay.
They give us criteria, a certain number of, preference points based on income and household size and all kinds of stuff.
That's
And I
fine.
think it's a fixed amount per month that they get,
Yeah. It's $250.
$250 per month per household.
So the planning board payments that we got don't necessarily have to be routed through affordable housing unless that's part of the agreement, right? When we wrote them through the CPC, we could put them into the CPC and then route them to any one of the buckets later, right? Depending on the agreement.
Depending on the donations that came in, the ones that I know of recently have been all for affordable housing.
But was that because the planning board negotiated it that way or the developer wanted it that way? Or so we could.
Combination, I think.
We could say CPC in general.
Yes.
General fund.
Yeah, we could.
It could say that, yes.
It's more flexibility for the fund itself, and we're thinking,
Then you could use it for affordable housing or open space, for example.
right, or whatever you've got, if you have 900,000, and you've just mentioned a few projects that cost, 2/3 of that.
So I think from the big picture standpoint, there are so many things that we could do. The big issue, again, is we have been fortunate to have had a lot of these housing projects have these fee in lieu of, so it's essentially doubled. I mean, the initial amount that the CPC funded the trust with was over $500,000, right? And since then, we've acquired another $500,000 through the fee in lieu of. So if we didn't have that, the trust would essentially be, closer to probably $700,000. So it's a big number that has happened. And so I have some questions in terms of how the Affordable Housing Trust could use some support. For an example, on the sheet that was sent to you all, at the very bottom it says, funds that could be made available by town meeting vote. There are still some dollars from Grimes Lane, $30,000 that are not yet available, and I think that it could use someone from the finance department working with us to determine, has that number been overlooked from the past, or is that number still kind of in the works? Carolyn and I discovered back in March that there were some discrepancies in the numbers between what flowed through CPC and what was actually showing up on the Affordable Housing Trust books. So there's that one. Then Jones Meadow, again, there's a number discrepancy originally in their decision
And
from...
maybe we could talk about this offline.
Okay, that's
fine. We had a big group, so.
Got it. So there are just some numbers that are in discrepancy, up to $39,000 potentially. And then again, if there's a future match, that's important money to make sure that we get into the kitty, so to speak. So getting some getting some support from the finance department would be helpful. In terms of select board, it would be great to get support for staffing that action plan. And then in terms of our colleagues on CPC, to approve the amounts under those unrealized funds would be really great. And so if you have questions,
the two units that are being built onto Adawan, what is the definition of affordable for those?
So Habitat, if AHT goes with Habitat, it's 60% AMI, so.
I'm sorry, what?
60%.
60%?
Of the area median income.
So what is that? A little to a lot.
So about up to $70,000 a year, I believe.
Okay.
So somebody that can qualify for a mortgage and still be able to afford to purchase.
and they would go through a lottery system.
Okay, so it's not somebody that's on Social Security. It's somebody that's got a job and can get a mortgage.
We have talked about, is one of the units an elder unit, or are they both family units? We don't know. We haven't decided yet. It depends on the septic and how much septic we can put into that spot, which is going to be a little tricky.
Okay.
But it's, any of those things are possibilities.
So there's no way that the committee can, or the trust can have money set for Littleton residents for affordable housing, those in need, seniors. It has to go to either a lottery system, statewide. This is one of my biggest concerns. I'm trying to figure out a way to help Littleton residents first.
If you're a
and then-
Littleton resident, especially a long-term Littleton resident, you're probably right. So it's very difficult to adhere to federal fair housing requirements. or the state does allow some leeway for local preference.
Yeah, I'm talking about need, I'm not talking about color of skin. Need.
But the need is, we have to comply with federal law.
That's what I'm asking, is there another place that this money could be better spent in the housing sector for Littleton to take care of their residents that in need first, and then open it up to the state? I guess that's what I'm trying to, I know, does that make sense? I mean, it sounds selfish, but I'm selfish for Littleton residents, because I know
Well, right now
we sit on a committee, tax one, so.
I'm gonna push back, and I know we've got a good working relationship, and I don't mean this personally, but what you're asking is there a way for the town to not comply with federal fair housing?
No,
but think about the LRAP. I mean, that's a great example of us helping
Should we
Littleton
be
residents, or
doing
we
more
could
there?
work on, we could start a maintenance fund for people who are going to, have trouble roofing their house or need a new heating system. I think those kinds of things.
Right, there are a lot of other programs that the town could be, Affordable Housing Trust could be looking at, and I think that'll be a great benefit of going through the 5-year action plan process.
But building a house is very constricted.
Yeah, I mean, we sat today in a meeting at 4 o'clock that showed 27% of seniors are in a staggering level in Littleton, below the poverty line, if you will, but it was significant. That's why I bring it up, not because I could care less about the rest of the state. It's because we have Littleton residents that if there's a way to help residents that have been committed to Littleton for a period of time, paying their taxes and doing these things, what is there for us to start putting money into?
Well, maybe we can talk about the assistance programs, and yes, Angus is one of our committee members.
Oh, sure.
Gary wasn't saying let's beat the system. He was saying if there's a different project that we can do that can benefit.
Right, rather than building 2 affordable units that nobody can afford to buy, the low-income people can't afford to buy, should we spend whatever money we're spending on that some other way, like you were saying, LRAP, or helping them stay in their house, or
but I bet they're going to
cutting their taxes. I don't know what the answer is, but is there a better way to spend our money?
And I think they need the staff. I think you're going to say, give us the staff, and we can figure out the other programs we could use to better target the money.
Yes, thank you. So well said.
Have we worked with the EHS to figure out the needs of the communities, what you could do?
So,
please.
I wanted to contribute that part of what we do in the pre-qualification process, little residents are scored higher than residents from other community. It's not a direct help, but it's indirect. There's no way we can give direct help without going afoul of what Maren was talking about, federal law. So little residents are scored higher than other residents, and that's where the gain is.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
And there are other programs outside of housing programs that the town could think about taking on. The old septic loan program helps. I mean,
These all can fall under the CPA.
Not necessarily. I'd put it under the planning department bucket.
So the CPC dollars for housing are eligible for acquiring, creating, preserving, supporting, rehabilitating, or restoring.
Quite a bit.
And the way that we have been able to do the assistance has also been approved. So we're doing the kinds of things that the CPC dollars are supposed to be used for.
I think,
That's okay.
I'm making these numbers up, but I mean, rather than, someone here said, rather than build 2 new houses, I'd rather help 20 people fix their roof or fix their septic. I mean, it seems like that's a,
I'm not sure you can do that.
well,
I think, if I read correctly, if you're using dollars to rehab a property, you have to audit with CPC funds, for one.
Right, and it has to be affordable housing, so the town would have some way to put a deed restriction on that home. You know, I've had this conversation with town council, and it's tough to find.
So I think you can see that we have collectively a lot of ideas. We just need to be able to explore them methodically so that we don't go down the wrong path and then realize we can't do something or that we're not supposed to be doing something.
And in the case of the Habitat House, we're getting 2 units for $50,000, right? So I mean, but to your point, how else can we leverage the funds we
Right,
have?
that's all.
Please bring it on. We want to hear about it, right? Like
Yeah, absolutely.
maybe your brother-in-law is a nonprofit affordable house builder, in which case he should definitely call us.
One thing I'm curious
No,
about.
probably not.
Yeah, so I guess one thing you had mentioned that I'm a little curious about. So you talked about a unit or some property that had been kind of designated for affordable housing in the development, and then using Affordable Housing Trust money to potentially do construction there. What's the norm when I guess I'd always assumed that when a development has units set aside for affordable housing, that was being built as part of that development versus just money that was put aside, just like, part of the parcel or something being put aside for the future. So I guess what's the norm? Is it normally the builder building that, or is that normally a town responsibility that?
Well, the town now has inclusionary housing zoning bylaw, where if it's less than 19 units, the units have to be built on site. If it's more, am I going the right direction? And there can be a payment in lieu of for certain.
Yes.
I'm going the wrong direction.
Well,
Between 6 and 19 units,
Yes.
it can be a payment in lieu of in negotiations with the planning board. So we haven't gotten a development yet that's being constructed under the payment in lieu of. One approved, that's still in litigation. So it's.
It could vary.
It can, yeah.
Okay.
It can vary.
Thanks.
How often, Matthew, do these opportunities with like Habitat for Humanity
This is
come
the
up?
first one I've seen. I've been on the AHT for 3 years. So, and that was only because the Brown property was purchased with part of the set aside as it has to. There's a parcel set aside for affordable housing.
Is that deeded so that if 2 people buy a unit in the duplex and then they move on, the situation changes and they're doing well and they're looking to move on or upgrade, does that vacated unit have to remain affordable?
Like part of the
So it's
deal with
deeded.
part of the deal with Habitat is you take on that
Right.
mortgage forever, right? But yes, the house is definitely deed restricted.
It was the first in like 20 years. I remember when the other one was.
Yeah. In fact, just as we were starting this one, she paid off her mortgage. So that was a nice
Because
little bit of.
the town does own parcels around town where
Yeah.
if there's other opportunities to do this type of project.
I mean, I think
Good.
that Habitat would love to, and they have a bandwidth constraint, and I'm not aware of other situations where we could, provide a lot and have someone come in and build a house for free for someone who's like, who's someone low income or.
I think one of the things that we can do as a trust, along with consultants, is perhaps even take a look at what other towns have been doing that are of similar size and have a trust in their community, because we're not the first ones to have gone through this. And so the fact that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, I think, would be really helpful. But as you know, we're all volunteers, and so being able to find that level of capacity is really important.
Anything else? This has been very helpful. I, for one, wasn't really up to speed in what the committee was doing, so this was very helpful.
well, happy to come before you all and have more conversations like this. I think it's very helpful.
I think we all agree we will make that happen. There's a commitment that we'll make that happen.
I'm sure we'll be meeting with the two boards to talk more about the potential increase in CPA coming up for town meeting. We'll be here sooner than we think.
Steve, you and I put a number of hours into identifying those types of lots around town that are taken in tax title or for whatever reason that could potentially be sites. You know, maybe Habitat says every 3 years or every 5 years because they want to get to other towns. But if we can identify that and make sure that whatever red tape needs to be cut away, we can work in that direction.
It's also possible to use like the tech, right? It won't be as cheap if you're getting things donated. You're getting labor donated, not necessarily supplies, but there's other ways we can attack it other than just Habitat.
Habitat uses them. Yeah, they love them.
Yeah, it sounds like, getting rid of the bottleneck they had, right? It'll make a big difference.
Yeah.
I know, like, as a company, we've been trying, at my employer to do Habitat for a couple of years, and we couldn't get them to take our money and be part of the project because they were so concerned with bandwidth. So I think that approach is really good, right?
I just also want to call out Solomon, who volunteered. His company, his employer, donate septic systems to Habitat houses. So we're looking into that as part of this bill too, which is a nice little add-on there. So thank you.
Just one last.
Thank you for working for them.
If we were to find, a property and wanting to do something like this, are we constrained by our usual size, restrictions?
Lot size?
Well, lot size and house size. I mean, it's funny. I've got people who are talking, saying, "Oh, let's go sell our big house and get a tiny house." I mean, it's not ideal. It's not for everybody, but there are ways to get. Some of these tiny houses are not bad for pretty short money. I'm just wondering, would that be something that our whole regulatory apparatus could handle?
Medium tiny.
They're talking tiny, like Monopoly houses.
No, but I mean,
you know what I mean?
They're like 120
square feet.
Well, as a town planner, you say...
Zone for more dense housing near the commuter rail station.
There you go.
You're part of the way there.
But if you wanted to put a 200 square foot house on a whatever standard lot, and you had room for septic, can you do that?
If you have room for septic, yeah. Which around the lake is...
Just trying to think out
I have a question on, go ahead.
Yeah, so before we move on, I just wanted to just ask one thing, which was the fact that, I know, Steve, if you're talking about moving on, that's fine. But that, as you said, town meeting's coming along, and I got to put the warrant together. So, my understanding as of tonight is CPC voted, or at least is inclined to go from 1% to 2% and make that recommendation. The select board has already taken that vote to go from 1% to 2%. I believe that would only leave then, and again, the board may want to revote that tonight. I just want to make sure we understand where we are. I think this is the first time this has been introduced to the Fincom. So,
we did a consensus. We didn't actually vote. We did a consensus because you presented to us before. Now I think
that's fine.
There's a lot more information that came to light for sure.
Yeah.
But I think we need to give some direction.
Yeah.
And I realize you can't go to town meeting probably with two options. I don't know.
I'm just trying to say there's no time like the present. So if with that said, I mean, it would be good to get some while everyone's here and while it's all fresh in everyone's mind, just to be able to get a sense around the table where people are at. But that's up to you both of you. I like the guidance, but it's
Each one of us.
I was just
in session separately. So we can work together.
right. Okay, so it would be a majority vote as a group, but I guess my question was still that presenting to the town, now the CPC has agreed to 2%, requesting that increase. There is we don't even want to put in front of the town the option of 3%.
And just as a point of clarification for process-wise, so what this would be then, you'd work on this together, so that the motion that would go forward at the special is what you are recommending. So that, and then would then go to the polls in May. So the both boards working collaboratively, and specifically, well, it would have the option of making a recommendation, but it is ultimately the decision is going to be made by the taxpayers at the polls. So whatever you do is ultimately is really a decision about what you're going to be putting on the warrant for consideration for the polls.
So when does the warrant close?
The 15th September.
I think that's right, yeah. You have time.
One thought, we talked about it a few times about planning and things like that. So the one thing that would be helpful to vote from a finance perspective is we have the 2+ million plus the money coming in. How much goes towards debt service, and what are the new projects coming forward that we plan to use the money for? Seeing that on a 1 or 2 pager would be helpful to vote on 2% or 3%. I'm not against either one, but I would like to see what's the plan on how to use the money.
Right. At this point, it's just do good, avoid evil. And you're asking people to vote for an override. Small as it is, it's an override. Call it what it is, it's an override.
With a return on your investment, though, which
Yes,
is more than we've ever given the town.
Okay, but I'm just thinking about what you're gonna run into.
Yeah, no, believe me, I know.
So just be careful, and you're gonna be asked, okay, what's it gonna be used for? Well, we're gonna do all this wonderful stuff. I've seen this movie
Well, I mean,
before.
they've got a list of wonderful stuff that they've done, so I think that
Right, that's the plan, right.
that holds true. That's the demonstration. Look at, this is what we can use this on. This is what we want to use it on. So I guess the question is, the two boards, are we voting? We're looking for motions on, let's go with the recommendation, the CPC requesting 2%.
It wouldn't be a joint motion. It would be a
It's not a
motion.
joint
Select
motion?
will do their own motion.
Okay.
Fincom will do their own motion.
Because you have to have 2 recommendations.
Right. And just for a clarification, I mean, the ballot, that's way down the road. I mean, isn't it possible to go to town meeting with 2 options? The town picks one of
That's
them,
what I
and then
wanted
we
to do.
take that one to the poll?
So you don't need to go with 2 options. We could go, say, 2%, and then someone on the floor can make it 3, right? And then you vote that up or down, and then you go back to what you already had. So there's no point in actually having 2. 1's sufficient, because you can change the 1.
Can you go up? That would be my
So,
question.
yeah,
Why can't you just change it on the floor to be 3?
right, because there's an expectation, and I'd have to check with town council on this, but that if someone gets the warrant and they see an expectation that there's a vote at 2%, and then someone goes to 3%, then what town council may say is that the people who were informed about this said, well, geez, I don't need to go because it's now, but now it's
It's only 2%.
expanding, and it may be unfair to a resident who saw that and said, well, if I knew it could go up to 3%, I would have shown up. So I would caution you on that as an alternative. I'd also caution you on giving both options too, because I think that's really where the leadership that we're looking for from the select board and the Fincom to say it's going to be 2%, it's going to be 3%, and then up to that, and then after that, it ultimately, just like any override, it's up to the taxpayers about what they want to do. So remember, you're giving them the option here. So that's just the thing.
I think, and I agree, and I think you're right. I think there's no way the town moderator would know
Right.
exactly what you're saying.
It's about fairness to this is what my sense would, again, I have to confirm it with town council, but I think they'd probably say it's expanding. You can always go down. You could always go down, but in this case, if you went to if they made a motion to say, we're going from 2 to 1.5%, something like that, that would be allowable. It's when you're increasing the scope, Ryan, is when problems occur.
Right. And Mark, that your case is just moving the money around. It's not, in other cases, we can vote Article 4 items up or down, but there's not, and yes, that could put us out of budget where we would need extra money, but it's not you're not voting something that directly is changing the tax. I'd just be surprised if town moderator or not.
It's on council.
So you'd have to go
Either
to town
way,
meeting
either
with 3%, and then have someone on the floor say at 2%. That's allowed.
That would be allowed, right, because
Yeah.
then if it goes down, then, right, then you're not overburning, right.
Oh, you're killing me, man.
I'm just,
Yeah.
I would prefer we kept the 2% and found the other 1% in the couch cushions. And it's going to require work on our part and potential tightening and others, but I think it's a commitment from the taxpayer and a commitment from us to hit the 3%.
I would prefer 2% and whether or not we can get to 3%. So, either way, like, let's try for 3, but even if we don't make it, let's go to 2. In my opinion.
So support
I support
CPA.
changing the rate to 2%.
Commit to funding it fully so we can get the full match.
And commit, policy-wise, commit to, finding the money in the couch cushions.
I agree with you that, we might not always be able to fund the 3%, but it should be a conscious decision that we're taking money out of that 3% and saying,
Okay.
we need something else instead. Right? And it's,
Sure.
by policy, we fund it at 3%, and by override, we reduce it.
Right. And just keep in mind
Well,
whatever
that's gonna be a tough
motion,
policy to
Override,
write now.
right,
you know,
just keep in mind whatever motion would be made, the policy would be separate.
Yep.
That wouldn't be a
Tax
vote.
motion.
Right, that's just something you could speak to, because you couldn't, town meeting can't hold you accountable for that, but they can hold you accountable to say if you're going from 1% to 2% and asking for that to go on the ballot.
Mr. Sanders.
Mr. Chair, I think the Affordable Housing Trust will adjourn.
all right, thank you for the
Thank
presentation.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Very educational tonight, thank you.
George, you want to come up to the mic and pick you up?
You can hit me. George Sanders, 682 Grave Road. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, this has been something hard to follow here tonight with regard to this funding for the CPA. I understand that the CPC is saying they want to go with 1% more increase to make it 2%. Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct.
Well, I think you ought to stay away from talking about 3%. Because the 3% was that talking with Mr. Mark Rambacker and with the chair who reserved his time on supporting when there was 3 members that voted to go to 2%. So now the select board was supposed to try to come up and see if they, with Fincom, and see if they could come up with the 1%, which would be added to the 2% if the people passes at the town meeting, will give you 3%. That's where I think that you ought to be, because, I can't cry by spilled milk, because I can tell you right now, this Fincom board and the select board did something wrong because they used taxpayer money to bail out Park and Recs. Park and Recs was not a full flush enterprise. And you used money at one of the town meetings, I believe it was $265,000, that you approved to bail them out because they had a shortfall in their budget. Now, I understand that the town cannot come up and take the 2% and add it to the 1% and give you 3%. But at the same token, I think you can do better than what you're doing right now. That is that you ought to create a stabilization fund for the CFC. And I think that you should take what they call free cash, because there's no free cash. There's excess money, taxpayers' money. Take some of that free cash and put it over into the stabilization. And if you can find any other money like Amazon
on the excise tax, they paid $23,000 last year, I believe it was, on the vehicles. And I don't think anybody in the town is keeping track of how many vehicles that they are keeping down there. It went from 2 years, it went from 51, I think, to 59. So we should know how many vehicles that is being staged here in Littleton overnight. They say it's 59 vehicles only, and that generated the $23,000. Yeah, all money comes in, it goes into the budget, and you say, well, we got this already tacked in to do this, to do that, to do that. That is true. But at the same token, if you're going to want to have this stabilization fund in place, I'm looking down the road. I'm looking at the point that when you started getting new growth out of this 550 up here, that's the opportunity time then to stick money over in for this CPC so that they can use it to go with the CPA and put it in the state fund in there to draw this extra money. But unless you do that, you're going to still come back and say, well, we can't find it, I don't know where we can do it now. My point is this, I don't know when they need the money to put in there to go up to 3%, but I think one thing you ought to do is that you ought to send a clear signal to the taxpayers here. If you vote this 1%, which I support, to the 2%, don't come back and ask us for more. Because any way you mold it or shape it, Prop 2.5 on the property, you taking the first 100,000 off of the property tax assessment, and then you're hitting us with the 1%, which is current now. If they pass on the 2, it'll be the 2%. No matter how you mold and shape it, there's a 2% tax that's paying on the property, and we're paying 2.5 on property just and a half. So that 2 and 2.5 come up to 4.5. It may be between 4.1 and up to 4.5% that people are paying on their property. No matter how you shape it, it's a tax. And it's a property tax that's being paid. I think we need to get the people back down to where they ought to be with the 2.5%. And the town, if you want that, then you make provision. You need to start somewhere now. And if there's $2.5 million and another $1 million over here in the trust, why can't you take some of the money over there and what you got here and put it into this funding and draw that money down? As Steve said earlier, some money in a trust fund or some money in a stabilization fund is better than no money in a stabilization fund. So maybe you don't get up. Maybe you get up to 3/4 instead of the 1%. Well, that's better. Any money you put in there is going to be better than putting no money in there. And I am telling you, as a taxpayer, I am not happy with the fact that if the town thinks that they're going to ride in our pockets with this money, because if God give me my health and strength and I live, I hope to put an article on there that we abolish this. When you started making growth money into this town, that's why I'm telling you now, put something in place, start feeding money in there, take care of this if you want that. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Yeah, I think regardless of the plan, I think we've discussed that 2%, 3%, we need to start thinking long-term policy in place. That's kind of where I was leading. No matter what it ends up in a town meeting or in a ballot vote, if we can start to develop a policy, whether it is a stabilization or whatever we're doing, to start to take away, sure, I'd love to get it to 3% period without ever even touching the money that the voters vote on. In other words, we found a mechanism down the road that's getting the 3% for us without having to do this. That should be the goal. What that looks like comes with long-term planning on growth. We have to attach this 3% to, which right now is sitting at about 1.4 million probably, 3%. 1 point, so that's a number that we have, that's kind of sitting out here in front of us. That's the number we have to get to somehow, some way to build up in a fund in a yearly basis, if we really want to do this the right way.
I think it's easier to get. I think it's easier to get there too if, like, you can say, okay, we're going to fund cap stabilization, for example, less, and fund CPC stabilization, which is going to fund.
That becomes part of a financial policy.
Right,
But
but it's tough for me to get there mentally without saying, okay, and that's going to fund 5%, 10%, 15% of our capital plan as it stands today over the next 10 years, right? I think that's the data that we need to tie to. These funds can do that, and they're eligible for CPC, et cetera, right? To really have a data-driven.
Well, how
Kind of
can-
going with Alvin's point before is, what is the plan? What are the projects? I mean, somebody mentioned it here, I think it was Chuck, said one of the first things, we need to start prioritizing some of these parcels that are coming up. Well, we've been asking for something like that for years. You know, let's prioritize, so we don't make the list. It doesn't have to be public. Keep it to ourselves, because it's you know, gets out there. People are just going to jack up the prices, but we know what the parcels that we need are. Prioritize them. That's all. Number 10 comes due. Do we really need number 10? Number 1 is going to be coming very soon. Let's save up for that. I mean, I think that's the kind of the plan that you're talking about. Let's see some numbers to this, because just shoving money into this pot and letting it sit there, and this project may be coming up, or this project. Well, we have enough money for the tennis courts right now. Do we need to put more into that bucket for something else? Yeah, we're going to need a field down the road, sure. But we need to plan these things out. We can't just. There's nothing. There's no plan in place that says we need. At least I haven't seen it.
Well,
We
you
need
created the
A, B,
policy.
C,
Who was on the board when we created policy? It was a while, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
15 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe even more. But and I think it stemmed from the high school, where like we've got to start we've got to start creating policy, financial policy. It had to be a pain period in there.
It was very
Because you're
painful.
taking the money, putting it into stabilization before we even get to see it.
Right.
Right.
That's the
It
only
was-
way. That's the only way you save.
It was a painful process. We had that huge debt service payment coming due, and we had no money to pay it. And we wound up having an override, an operational override.
Oh yeah.
2 years after we put that debt in place. And we took steps as a finance committee at that point in time to start switching things around. So when we're borrowing so much, because our debt service was sky high, we had a couple of years of painful capital exclusions that we had to put through
Right.
to start making that shift. And since we did that, we haven't borrowed for a piece of capital, you know, a plow or anything. We were doing that all the time in those past years. We haven't done that in 20 years.
Well, I see other communities still doing it.
And because of the bond rating, that saved. We believe that saved the town $1 million a year, you know, in borrowing costs. So I mean, so if we just went that way, I mean, and I think to your point, one could imagine us. I mean, right now we have a policy that says so much goes in cap stabilization, so much goes in debt stabilization, so much goes in just stabilization.
Right.
One could imagine saying, pull those percentages down a touch, and say every year a certain amount goes into, you know, the CPA, so that we're getting the benefit, and we have to figure out what all those numbers were, but so that we would get the benefit of the match without asking essentially for an override. So I'd say before we say yes to an override, I think it's incumbent on us, to the citizens, to say, what would it take to tweak those numbers? And you know, that would mean a little less goes in each of those other stabilizations, but those ones aren't getting us the match. So I think
We need a plan to get there.
Exactly.
right. But I think it's worth at least one more. So sorry, but I'm going to suggest that we actually not vote right tonight, but that we take as an action item of the two boards, figure out what would it take to tweak that so that we can divert the money so we can get the match without an override.
So,
And the goal would
Brian, I
be
guess
to
a
have it done
procedural question
before
for
the
you,
warrant.
Ryan.
We can do it this year.
We do it at the special, the actual ballot is until May, after
Right.
the May town meeting.
Right.
If this waited until the May town meeting to come forward.
I don't think we could do that because it's a matter of having the notice has to be a longer period of time because they couldn't, I don't believe we could
So we
do it.
couldn't have it right away.
Yeah, I think it's like 35 days between.
Yeah. And then
Between the
that,
meeting and the ballot.
because we had talked about that last year when Carolyn was originally researching it to talk about it for the Maytown meeting and the issue that would pose in terms of the 35 days and that between the annual and the election, we need more time.
I think it could be a combination of the two. I think we can go to town requesting the extra 1%. Meanwhile, in this 10-month window, policies start to get developed on a plan. It can be a longer-term plan to get to 3% even. But let's talk about a stabilization fund or whatever we want to call it, a commitment to the CPC pool to get at least the 1%. And it might not be this year. It might not. We can't because we don't have this money is baked. When I say that, it is. We know where our money this year is being committed. So we have to kind of look now at 2020, I guess 5, to get to that place or to start making a dent in that, and then slowly erode on even the 2% that we're asking the taxpayers to do. And this becomes a town policy. 3%. It's coming. It's just like a stabilization fund.
Right.
And we're no longer. Now we've made a commitment to, my goodness, 20% interest this year, 10% maybe in a bad year, 5%, 30, 40% in another year. This has to happen. I think it's.
I agree with you. And you look at the town meetings, there's never a debate at town meeting of, oh, should we put this money in capital exclusion, whatever exclusion. Right. It's like, no, that's just policy. We do that. Of course we do that. And I think it'd be great if we get that with the CPA. And then you don't even need a ballot vote for that. It's just our fiscal policy.
Right, but I think if we go to town meeting with the 1% and we've drawn out a plan to at minimum eliminate to get to the 3% over whatever couple years, whatever that takes. If we're looking at, the IBM property, or we're looking at other growth opportunities, then it has a much greater chance of success because we've got a plan to actually get rid of the 3%, and it might be 10, 15 years. I don't know. To get to that comfort level financially as a town with new growth and some of the. There's a lot. I mean, the sewer's a big thing, but there's a lot coming into that common over the next 10 years, right? In new growth.
So, I mean, that just gets to more of the let's put the plan in place before we ask the residents to put their money
Or at
in.
least be able to articulate what the plan
You
is.
said it. There's going to be new growth that comes in with this source system. There's going to be. As a policy for the town, we could be taking a piece of, just a little sliver of that new growth that's going to be coming in and putting it aside into a stabilization account. And then each year funding that money that goes in. So I think to be physically sound, I think we need to come up with a plan before we ask the taxpayers to put their money up for this. Let's see what we can do as a town. It may not be all this year. It may be next year, it may be the year after that we get to that point. And then if we can't bridge that gap, then I could see us going to the taxpayers and saying, okay, we tried to do this, but we need your help.
So can I ask a procedural?
I was trying to run them together at the same time.
Ryan, can I ask a
I think we can do
procedural
it.
question? Even if we voted at town meeting, do we have to actually put it on the ballot if we came up with a policy? If it passed at 2% at town meeting.
So remember, in terms of the policy is looking to bridge the gap between the 2 and the 3%.
Steve is saying something
Well, I'm
different.
saying 3. We want to get to 3 eventually.
The article probably references a valid
There is a
vote.
minimum commitment. There is a minimum surcharge to be part of the program.
So you have to keep the 1%.
So my question is, let's say that we put the article out at town meeting that said 2%. that's still not actually passed until the May vote. If we came up with a fiscal policy by May that says the towns come up with a way that we can fund the 2% and keep it at 1, do we still have to go to a ballot, or
Yes.
do we go?
Well, you still go to the ballot, but you
But
can
we could
also say,
don't, please vote no.
but, well, no, you can still say yes, but we have a plan, a fiscal policy that says
Yeah.
by 2027, this is going to be funded, and we can come back to town meeting and take the 1% back away,
Okay.
keeping the 1% in there, because we have to commit to the 1%.
So what we're saying, no matter what, is it sounds like we want to go with the 2% now and then potentially in the future roll it back, right? Because we're not going to get
Well,
to,
that should be the goal, right? I mean,
I'm saying we need the taxpayers'
1%.
2% at this point.
Initially,
So that we can get 3%. If we have stronger policies and better growth, we might be able to claw back some of that 2% and tell them, you know what, we don't need the 2% anymore. Let's do another town meeting vote and lower it.
It's not that we might be able to. We literally can put it in our policies where we're going to.
Well, we can put it in our policies and.
We've been pretty sound on our fiscal policies following them.
Right, X percent goes in each of the stabilization funds.
Yeah,
That's just.
I would just caution everybody, though, I mean, keep in mind, I mean, trying to get to claw back from 2%, that's, initially we're talking about roughly 500,000 to supplement them to the 3%, so now we're going backwards, now you're talking about, even more.
I'm not saying we should be going backwards.
So I just, I don't want there to be irrational exuberance about this, I mean,
I'm going to say that the backwards would never happen.
I don't think it would either. I don't
Right.
think and I'm thinking finding the 2% is going to be very difficult in the budget. Right,
Can
I
I
think
ask
finding
what-
a 1% for the stabilization is possible.
How much are we committing to stabilization funds now, across the various?
Whatever the free cash level is for the year that we calculated out, I believe 10% has to go to the different stabilization buckets. I
Do we
believe.
is it vary?
It varies from year to
Varies
year.
significantly from year to year?
So is that 30% off the top then, if there's 3 buckets? So then it becomes if it's 30%, then maybe it's a reallocation amongst those.
Exactly.
To be able to think about
Well,
it
that's the
that way.
thing.
We can do it.
That's the
9 and
thing.
9,
All right,
9
no,
and
that's
9
it,
and
yeah.
3
So then we
Go
would
through
be,
the process this time before we ask the taxpayers to
We
put
can
this
always pull
in.
the article too, if by miracle we have this policy.
right.
I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of like, is that 5 million a year, is it a million a year, is it 10 million a year, is it?
So what did this last year, what did we put in total into the 3 stabilization funds?
Hand, they could not tell you.
It was less than $1 million.
It was 700 and something thousand just into capital stabilization itself. And then we had 150 earmarked for regular stabilization. We had 400,000 or so earmarked for debt exclusion stabilization. I mean,
In many years,
there was money.
in many years, we don't do the minimum. In many years, we've gone above and beyond.
And-
Now, recently, obviously,
The other thing I'm sorry, the other thing we have to realize is down the pike, and this is going to be, again, 3, 4, 5 years down the pike, we've been paying extra into our pension fund. We're going to be fully funded well before Middlesex County is.
10 years probably, right?
So we'll be paying the normal costs, and we won't be paying this extra. That money would be available in this budget cycle.
And there's a commitment.
Same thing with OPEB. We've been paying into our OPEB fund. We are almost fully funded in OPEB ourselves. That number is going to go down. It went down this year when we shifted that money over to pension. Those are 2 big numbers that we have to pay, that we have to play with.
We're about 5 to 10 years ahead of.
Right?
Absolutely.
Sounds
So
to me-
I think there's money out there. We just need a policy or just the brainstorm how to bring it all together.
Let's commit to it.
That becomes of the finance committee to,
Let's commit to
to
it.
look at that, that's fine, then we can commit to that, so.
So I'm on the CPC as well. Unless the town's willing to commit in the next year or 2 to this stabilization funds of the CPC, sounds like maybe it's going to take longer than that.
if it is going to take several years, it seems to me we do need to go to the 2% from the taxpayers to cover the next few years until we get to those new development projects that are in the future.
But I haven't heard what those projects are that you need to fund. That's so immediate that you need the funds tomorrow for.
Any new open space project beyond the Webster property. That's one right there. Recreation projects. This tennis court project's going to take most of the money, which we'll probably have to bond it because otherwise it takes all the money out of the rec pocket.
Mm-hmm.
So those are two examples of immediate projects. And then there's other ones.
So one of the problems is you don't know when the open space is going to be available. So you can't say that we're going to budget for, we know the Webster property, but if it wasn't available not for sale for 5 years, you're not going to say, let's not save for it for the next 5 years.
Well, that's why I have the
Right,
policy.
so that's why they need to start saving now. So when it does come up, then we can make a decision and say, yes, we have been saving for it. You put money, once you're done paying for your car, you don't say, oh, I don't need to make any car payments and I'm just going to wait for it to die and then start again, right? You want to stabilize it out, right? That's the whole point.
I'm willing to go to town with the 2% with a plan. I'm just talking to my board over here. With a plan. We can lean on the finance committee and the finance team to create policy that shows our exit strategy, if you will. The dependence on the town. We now have a stabilization. We now have a plan to get initially X 1%. Maybe it's within 10 years. Now we're some of the monies you just talked about. Let's commit to take that OPEB money, boom, and move it into these buckets that we're talking about.
And Steve, to your point, we started this by saying that in 5 years we're going to have a Shaker Lane project. Well, if in 5 years we're paying less on the OPEB and the pension, you can put much more into the debt exclusion to cover the debt exclusion we're going to have for Shaker Lane.
That was going to be one of my big points for this year.
So you're still going to need that 2%, right? Because there's always these other projects coming up. They're going to take some of that. So,
I mean, I know we're all at the same table, but we typically rely on finance committee's recommendations on things. So I am curious if you guys are going to vote tonight. I am curious what your thought process is on it, or what your. So if you,
I guess, take a poll of the committee. It's either vote now or let's try and work up a plan. And we have time until the 15th when the warrant closes to meet again with the select board and give our recommendation.
And then you have until the warrant to pull the article if we've come up with some miraculous plan or some windfall of money.
Or we can, right now we're going to vote to work on putting together the warrant. We always then take another vote on the warrant before special town meeting. So we're wasting time doing the warrant.
We're putting it on the warrant.
So they're going to put it on a warrant, but we can vote to recommend or not recommend.
Correct.
Right, so that's what we do later on. So if we say we want to see a plan and we want to see more information and nothing comes by the time we have special town meeting, we can always vote and say we do not support it because the stuff that we asked for, we didn't get.
And I don't think any of us particularly wants to put forward a proposal that you are not going to recommend.
Right.
So we would pull that probably.
I'd say since we have we don't have to vote tonight, and not voting tonight doesn't force us down one path or the other. I'd say we've talked about some alternative ways. I think we agree conceptually. We want to get the money in. Want to get the money matched. Stipulate all that. We've just surfaced some alternative ideas. We're not so time bound. I'd say let's use the time and come to a decision. But I agree with you. The selectmen propose thing, Fincom say no. That's not a trick I want to do very often.
I'll tell you what we can do. We can vote. We can vote to put it on the warrant. That's not the hardest thing. Well, that can be taken off the warrant at any time between now and November 1st. I think a plan is developed, a recommendation from Fincom forthcoming is developed, and then and we can even get to town meeting and say, in light of a plan that has come to fruition on policy, we are pulling this article. Or we can say we're going to continue with the article, but we have a plan that shows a way forward. And to get to 8 of the 3%, us matching, and then maybe even more than that. I think.
So I just want to get some clarification that the plan that you're talking about, the numbers, and you're talking about future growth, and it's 3 years, 5 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't want to wait that long to get to 3%. Is that also your feeling as well, or am I understanding that you're willing to wait, 3 years, 5 years until the growth comes in to get us to 3%?
So you're saying that we have to get to 2 first?
I would like to better understand what Fincom's sense of a plan is, and whether that plan is to get us to 3% as soon as possible, or whether that plan is to get us to 3%
when the money's there.
when we see the money that we're planning for multiple years down the road.
Yeah,
I have a sense of urgency about this because one thing we haven't talked about is the matching amount changes every year. So we can't count on, double-digit 30% every year. I don't think we've seen it go much higher than this, right?
It's definitely going to go lower this year.
Yeah. So, to me, this
more
is
communities come on, it dilutes it.
To me, this is something that we need to act on sooner rather than later, and it's sound fiscal policy to act sooner rather than later, considering that the match is going to keep going down.
I also think if we wait 3 years, then we have the lost opportunity of any of these projects that come up that we don't have the funding for, and we struggling for, right?
Yeah. That's just what I want to understand is this plan, is it to get us to 3% in 5 years, or is it to get us to?
So is the direction from the board for 2% right away, 3% right away? What's the feeling?
Well, I don't think you're not going to find 3% right away. You're not. It's not going to. So we know that. So I believe that the 2%, we need to look for the 1% sooner than later to get to 3. But we need a plan, and it could be 10 years. It probably is. If you're talking about fully funding it at 3% with policy, I have to believe it could take that long.
Taking that burden off the taxpayer.
To take the burden away from the taxpayer.
So I think we should I think the plan for Fincom should be to find 1%, right? And I don't see the point of ever going beyond the 1%, because if we want to go beyond the 1%, we can just do an underride, right? And give the money back on the other side of your taxes, right? We don't have to do the full 2.5%. We can give, if there's so much money lying around that we don't need it, we can find another way to give it back.
All right, so I guess the charge would be just
only fund the debt exclusions.
And I'm not saying it's going to be in a year. Maybe that 1% is a plan that you looked at in 3 years. We're going to have this new growth on the books, and this, maybe that is where we can capture this 400, 500,000. Maybe, I don't know. But to have a policy in place that's saying, even if it's a graduated thing over the next, between now and 2030,
so
this is going to grow.
There's two things here. One is the plan, the plan on how to get to the 3%, and the other is the plan on how are we going to spend the money. Because right now we're saying, let's increase my taxes, but I can't tell you what we're going to spend the money on. That's what I'm having. I actually don't even care about 2 or 3%. What I'm more concerned about is you're increasing the taxpayers' taxes, but you can't tell them how the money is going to be utilized.
Can I, a couple points?
That's a discussion at town meeting. They're going to have to present to the townspeople to get the vote.
So Alvin, just some points of clarification on that. First of all, no one at this table is going to be raising the taxes. Ultimately, it's going to be a vote. So let's just be clear about
We're proposing, we're proposing.
So we're not the ones, right?
We're recommending.
Taxing, right.
It doesn't go on the warrant if we don't.
Right. So ultimately, it's
from
that
standpoint,
right,
and town meeting does look to these boards
No, no,
for guidance.
I just,
So
Alvin had
I-
seemed to say that something, I just wanted to be,
Yeah,
because
so to
there's
be clear,
people
yeah, we're
watching
not
on
raising
TV
taxes.
here saying, why
We're
are they increasing my
proposing,
taxes?
we're proposing to raise taxes.
Fair enough, fair enough. But the other thing is in terms of the plan, okay, that in terms, and we have a capital plan, and we can kind of tie on what might be likely CPC funded pieces. I can assure you, without even looking at it right now in front of me, there will be plenty of opportunities to expend anywhere up to the 3%. We can develop the plan, and we'll provide that to you. But the issue is not, I don't think, there are going to be plenty of viable projects that would come up for the CPC that will, I mean...
Because we have $2.5 million there now.
Yeah, but...
No, I'm talking about the capital plan. So I think what you're asking for is, what capital projects would likely, we have a 10-year capital plan, so...
No, what I'm talking about is what will the CPC money be used for? So we have our $2.5 million, we have the 1% that's coming in now, we have our debt service on CPC funded items, and what is the new CPC stuff that's going to come in that'll be using that money?
Well, I'm not sure that's, I mean, yes, in a perfect world, we would know what land is coming up for sale.
But it's not all the land, right? It's tennis courts,
not.
it's other things,
But
right?
to finish my point, if we were to look backwards and say, had we had the 3%, had we had more than we had at the time, we could have funded Indian Ridge, Cooper Farm, whatever, Indian Hill rather, Cooper Farm, etc.
We don't know how much Indian Hill costs, so that's a moot point.
No, it's not a moot point. It's not a moot point. Because my point with all of this is that we are going to spend this money one way or another. Are we going to spend it having achieved 30% match, or are we not? Right? And so what I would like, what I think might be more educational for the town is to understand, had we had more money, what would we have spent it on in the past that you have already approved?
So I don't remember anything that
Cooper probably
We made it work.
The Cooper and the
Cooper.
Jones Meadow.
The seller would not have sold
The
that.
seller wouldn't sell it to the town, period.
Cooper and Jones Meadow were two things that we had potential opportunity for.
You're talking land specific.
Whether we
But
could
we didn't fund it because we didn't have the money in CPC.
Aha!
No, we
point.
didn't.
No.
That's not why.
So
we
there
did
are
it.
other reasons why those land purchases weren't made.
They
Not
made more
because we
money
didn't have the money.
doing what they did than selling it to the town.
They couldn't sell it,
End of
they wouldn't
discussion.
sell it to the town, period. I don't know how we could have done Indian Hill with CPC funds.
So my point is, everyone around here has been saying there's plenty of projects that we could have funded that we didn't, right?
I don't
I
recall
don't know
it.
what, I don't know what
That's
they
what
are.
I'm asking.
I've been here for
What are
9
they?
years and I don't know what they are.
What are they?
The tennis courts,
well, that's coming.
That's coming.
I mean, the football.
Yeah.
It just came up.
the football field, right? I
Well,
mean,
we didn't put it forward.
The track.
I mean,
The track wasn't eligible because of.
and it's not
Because the
necessarily
law
that we
changed,
didn't end up
right.
paying for it, but we didn't pay for it out of CPC funds.
At the time that the track went in?
I think that's much
Actual
more.
recreation wasn't eligible.
Yes, I understand. We couldn't have done the track at the time, right?
I decided.
I think that maybe the big things that we don't actually have necessarily a property, but we know that there are going to be open space properties that we want to purchase in the future. That's a big bucket. I mean, they tend to be large dollar figures, so that's a big piece of where a lot of the CPC funding is going to go. There are, the tennis courts are one. We have some other things trying to expand on the recreation side, field
Long ways.
access,
Long
field
ways.
usage. Creating new fields is probably going to be a need, particularly if we end up putting another building on Shaker Lane property. So that's on the list. There are some other, dog park is on the list of things that we would like to create someplace. The town has asked for it a number of times. It would be eligible, but it's not something that's happened yet. I think of some of the other, and then those are sort of the more active recreation things we have, and I'm sure we'll continue to fund trail improvements and the conservation lands.
Nagog Orchard's the one that,
And the orchard, I think, is another one that should be.
Well, and
So I think what we can provide is the list of things that are known, and then a list of things that, you know, are potentially.
Yeah.
Well, we
Yeah,
should
one
have
of the
categories.
strategies
I mean, there
for-
are certain categories. You know, it's not like we can put up a building or something. We might not be able to give you a list of projects right today, because sometimes we are reactionary. But we can tell you that it's only going to be in one of those 4 categories.
Well, the whole, sorry,
Sorry,
Ted.
Steve.
The strategy of, if there's a big land purchase comes through, using debt service, using debt to pay for that parcel, and having the CPC fund the debt service is a good strategy.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's
We can't tell you
no
which
reason why we
parcel of
can't do
land
that.
would
So
be-
Well, but no,
if a
but-
parcel comes in for $3 million, it doesn't mean we need to have $3 million sitting in this fund.
Sure.
We
No,
need to have the debt service.
We
for that.
need to know that we have the revenue to cover the debt service, right?
Exactly.
Okay, but that's still the same, we need to know how much money is going into CPC.
So we know 400,000 is going into CPC each year,
Right.
right now. And right now, you said, just before, during your presentation, around $70,000 a year total in debt service?
For what's on now, which is getting toward the end of the loans.
Right, so that
Well,
money will be
could have
falling
3
off.
properties in a row, 3 properties year, so you're going to have.
Right, and debt service decreases each year as time goes on. So more money will be available. So
Well, we
with,
could pay for it right up front, too. I mean, especially, you know, if you're going to get a matching grant from the state. I mean, they like that, too. If we had money to match that, which we did with
you
Williams.
can pay a certain percentage of it.
Brown.
A certain percentage out of the fund and borrow the rest of it. I mean, there's ways around this.
So one thing, as you were talking, kind of, you know, which highlighted to me how important it is that we are talking a lot more, because like some of the projects you mentioned are in the 10-year cap plan, right? I think we can plan for those expenses and CPC being a viable funding sources for them. Some of those things weren't, right? So we got to make sure that we're all working from the same list of things, and we're prioritizing, and we're not making decisions to buy something just because CPC has money when, if we didn't have the CPC funding, that would be pushed out, because we're pushing out stuff every year, right? And everything we're spending, regardless of funding source, is something that we're making decisions on, and we need to make sure that we're not bypassing that decision process and
right, this
prioritization
team,
process, right?
this group needs to meet definitely more often than not, especially with increase, if we're going to increase this.
So is the
Shouldn't
Wilson
do it
Aquatic
anyway.
Center eligible for CPC funds?
The aquatic
It
center?
is active recreation. I don't know if that's a CPC eligible project.
Active recreation.
Yeah, but it would be, yes, it would be, yeah.
And that's on the 10-year capital plan, and that will exhaust a huge portion of your budget for a long time.
Right, and once the Wilson Center comes there.
I'm not dead yet.
Memorial. It's not a time frame on it, says we need to fund this by this date. Then it's just a dream that everybody has.
Do you think I could have a water slide named after me? just one slide.
Bubbler, just a bubble.
One of those little text ones.
All right.
All right, so I think.
Gray area that needs to be
Well, you
clarified.
guys decide what you want to do.
The CPC does not, the projects are presented to us. I mean, but you had a good point that there is a list of projects, but they're presented to the CPC. I mean, we sort of know what's around, but we're not going and bringing projects in. The committees bring them to us.
But I mean, a lot of the land purchases organically come from the LCT and other places, and we all kind of know when they arise, and those are the big ticket ones. So whether we bring them to you or you come to us and say, please bring this to us, I guess either one would work.
The other one, the one we didn't know about was here tonight, the AHT, because I was
told.
What's all that money doing in there? What do they do with this money? Why does it keep going in there? And they're not, that's why I'm glad they came in front of us, because it did enlighten me, but also that's a better understanding of at least what's going on.
Well, one example.
The housing bucket.
One example that illustrates what a lot of the CPC projects might be apart from these big things is the Historic Society building is restoring all the windows. and they're doing it in a historical fashion. It's probably the best historic building in Littleton. And if they came to you and asked you for $120,000, would you find the money for that?
The historical bucket in the CPC.
Yes. and the windows are falling apart, and if they don't do it in the
There's
next
300,000 in there.
period of time. So these are the kind of projects that are coming before the CPC, and it would help in town meeting if people knew that there was more money. The other thing is, talking about future needs, the playing field situation in town is pretty bad, and it's going to get worse over the next few years because they're being taken out of. What if St. Anne's came to you and said, "We'd like to sell you those playing fields"? Would we have the money for that as part of the regular,
Historically, we would knee jerk and we would go to town meeting and ask for the money, and that's how we've operated.
Right, but I think CPC sort of greases the wheel a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
And the other thing I want to remind you, and I know the Finance Committee deals with issues that are much bigger than $500,000 a year. Everything that they fund is tangible. People can touch them. People can see them. People can be involved in them. They're not involved in the pension plan. They're not involved in the town's insurance and all that kind of thing, which sounds like you guys are doing a great job taking care of. These are things that people express a tangible interest in, which there isn't a lot in this town besides the schools that people go for. So I think, we're going through open space planning right now. You cannot believe the things people want. People want an arboretum. People want this. People want that. People want all kinds of things. They're not in your 10-year capital plan, but perhaps they can rise up in some fashion through the CPC. So it's just you can't have a plan for that. You can't have a plan for the projects, I guess is what I'm saying. You can try. You can have a plan to maybe shift them from the capital projects to CPC, but it's a different sale if I'm being asked to spend more money on the town for something that I can touch and see and benefit from directly. It's different than it is from almost anything else that we spend money on.
But Jeff, if I could I understand about the windows and such at the building, and I was a little shocked at the price, and people.
Well, that was the cheapest one, and
right.
There was a lot more than that. The other prices they got.
Right. But I think if you ask people, do you want to fix these windows, or buy another fire truck, or have us not raise your taxes? I think it would be that becomes a very tricky, nuanced thing, and I trying to maybe see if we can wrap it up. I think we have gotten a few points across. We've agreed that we need to have closer coordination between the CAP projects and CPC projects so that we can have more of an overall sense. I think we've agreed that we do want to get to the place where we're getting more of the match. We're figuring out the how, and I think our board would like to use a little bit of time that we have to try to figure that out.
That's it.
You want to do a motion on our board to recommend this being put on the warrant?
Sure.
And then
Obviously,
pending
the
recommendation.
2% gets put on the warrant.
If that's what you want motion is.
I mean, I would make that
somebody
motion,
wants a
yeah.
motion.
So I'll move that the select board votes to support the CPC to increase the match from increase the surcharge. Thank you. For 1%.
To put an article.
To put an article in the warrant to increase the surcharge from 1% to 2%.
I'll second that.
It's been moved by Matthew, second by Mark. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I'll say aye just to have consensus, but I think you more. Right.
Well, this is all, yes. So it is unanimous. It is unanimous.
Just say the select board voted in favor.
So the select board has voted in favor to put it on the warrant. Recommendations forthcoming on this.
Yes.
I think from all.
Yes.
This was just putting it on the warrant. We wanted to get this on the warrant, and now we can iron out these details in a future meeting with you. Watch your meeting, come to, get comfortable with what you guys need to do for a plan. I think we all agree, I think this board would like to see a plan, a policy, really. No matter how much it looks like it hurts, let's see a policy, and then we can decide if that's something.
We'll come back with an amendment to the financial policy that includes funding for the CPC.
Great. And so we'll have it on our agenda for our next meeting to chat about this.
Yes.
We have till November 1st to recommend the article.
When does the
warrant close?
No, the booklet go to print.
The booklet goes to print mid-October, right? The end of September, September 28th. September 28th it goes to print. But we've done in the past.
Recommendations
forthcoming, and you can do it on.
We'd like to avoid that, right? That's the. But it's better if there's a recommendation.
Oh, certainly. We'd love to get there.
We look like we know what the hell we're doing instead of the last.
So CPC is going to present the case on this and on why all the important things that are going on they've done in the past. I think it would be nice to have, at least from the select board and the finance team, this policy discussion in play where we're sitting here. We're really close to finalizing, if we haven't already, by November 1st, a policy that's going to give us a funding source for this.
I think that's what we can do tonight.
Carol,
discuss it.
so for
Yeah, we were gonna have a public meeting on the 3rd, it's the 3rd Wednesday of October. We figured by then people would have everything in their hands so that we could have a public information meeting. 20th or
That's the
something?
18th.
18th, yeah. 7, yeah, that's our typical meeting. I'm probably here, yes.
So for our next meeting, we'll talk about changes to financial policy, so homework for everyone. Go to the treasurer's website, pull out the financial policy, reread it.
Find the appendix, it's already
Come
there.
back with some recommendations. There is a CPC.
I move that the select board adjourn our
policy.
meeting.
Do we need, we're not here for the budget discussion?
Just a quick,
Oh,
quick for the budget.
All right, I have a motion.
well, I'll table it.
Yeah, we're going to hold the motion, table the motion.
Okay. FY25 budget season's fast approaching, just like town meeting is. Ryan and I looked back at Alicia's emails from last year. They were sent out to the departments on September 15th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So we're going to keep with that same timeline. We need some direction from the board as to priorities. So some direction that we can give to the department heads. Something that says, yes, craft your budget to do X, Y, Z. These are the priorities of the select board.
Gotta work with.
We've spoken several times that we would like to meet with the department heads to have them discuss their goals and what they want at roundtable so that we can.
We did it once in here like this.
And I think that would be very helpful for us to craft some direction because I don't really know.
So you
I don't have any fine
before
grain.
that. So
That's what I would
before
like.
September 15th, then we need to have those meetings.
If possible.
Is that possible, Ryan?
I mean, during the day, obviously, it could be at 4 p.m. or something. I mean, we've done it. That's what we did last time, I think. 10 and 4.
I think we did in the afternoon, I think, worked well.
But we,
Thanks all.
yeah, and that's where we kind of share our priorities that we've already discussed, and we've kind of locked in our priorities. We can share that with members, and we also at the same time get to hear what all the departments.
So, Steve, what sort of direction are you looking? I don't remember giving direction last year.
Well,
So, I mean, my memory's not that great, but.
That was one of the reasons why we had a $1.7 million deficit.
Okay, so what direction have we given in the past, since I only have 1 year of experience doing this?
I mean, yeah, in years past, like level funded, level service, right? I mean, there've been, various things. I mean,
So I thought that was what we always basically did. I mean, from my experience on the library board, every year, they got, the request was a levels funded and level services budget.
And that
Right.
direction came from the select board.
So,
Yeah, we
and I
can,
would imagine don't have the budget to do anything else this year, other than those.
well, we talk about our priorities, what those are, because that drives a lot of where some of this money's going. We're talking about Indian Hill, and we're talking about the orchard, and we're talking about sewering the common, all those things, I think, will give some direction.
So I think having a level funded, level services, and, if you had a goal, one goal item, like, if you wanted to go beyond, what do you need, if you had one wish, what would it be, type thing, right? Not that we would fund many of those wishes, but.
But there are some wishes. I mean, we've talked.
Well, I'm
about-
not saying but I want to know what the wishes are, but I don't think many of the wishes are going to come true.
Right, no, but I'm just thinking like more staff to allow our departments to do planning,
Yes.
that kind of thing, where it's money well spent.
Yes, but that doesn't come under level funded or level services, because if you're not.
Right.
We'll talk about some of the personnel requests that we already know are in the hopper with the different department heads, and that's another reason to have all the department heads together. They can share that with the rest of them, so they know kind of who's asked for what. But we already know resource officer. Give that as an example. That's a possible request that's coming from another resource officer at the schools.
We could look at
Schools
the,
and by the police department. So that's something we're going to have to discuss. That's a sourcing thing. That's the type of things you need to know, because that's the gift that keeps giving, right? Personnel. So all the other ones I think have been approved. I don't think I've seen any other personnel requests. So
For FY25?
yeah, for this, not at the special. I want to get the special
no,
first.
no,
But FY25,
Anything else personnel-wise?
I know they're coming. But we need to get the departments together to find out what those.
Right, because they were saying they could do, great things with the housing trust.
That's already approved.
Right.
and they have an
Yeah,
assistant.
we approved the assistant
Okay.
planner. That just
Yeah,
we've had
yes.
trouble. We've approved the
Facilities manager.
Facilities manager, health director.
we might even get a TA that's not interim sometime this year.
TA, a finance
Which we-
director.
Yeah, we were okay for this upcoming, with the exception of the student resource officer.
So that was a request that came in, and that
For
special.
special?
Yeah,
Special.
which we haven't really debated this out yet.
That's right.
It was presented to us at our last meeting last week. We haven't really discussed it as a group. Kind of going to count on you guys for a little bit of that too.
We can go back and look too. I mean, there's a lot that got cut last year between the initial budget and the town administrator recommended budget. So those are probably some of the initial requests too to look at. That
Yeah,
maybe
one
come
of the
right.
things,
exactly right.
I think from policy-wise, and I believe it's in the financial policy, I know Paul Glavy was the big advocate for this, is special town meeting shouldn't be budget two.
Right.
I know we've talked about
Here,
it.
here.
Right.
We talked about that.
Should not be.
We're very wary of
I
that.
totally agree with
But
that.
I also, when a director or the department head comes to us with a request, they don't just do it frivolously. I want to give it the due respect by discussing with the board and your board as well to resource it. But we can discuss that need and why that need
And
exists.
that was exactly what Tyler said. That was something that was in last year's cycle.
It was.
And we said, can you hold out for now? We'll save 6 months worth of salary if this comes to the specials. So that was our recommendation.
Okay.
Bring it back to us.
I just remember like 2 budget seasons ago, it was a personnel free-for-all.
Well, I'm very cognizant of not
that's
wanting
terrible.
special town meetings being a hiring fair by any means. I agree, but this is
I mean,
something, this was
going to be
unique.
specific things that do pop
Certainly.
up and things need to happen, but it shouldn't be open season for budget increases.
Agreed. I think we
But,
both.
but not,
Yeah.
not just open
Well-
season at all. It's special stuff. It's not just budget two. It shouldn't be town meeting two.
Unfortunately, it has turned into that a little bit, I think, over the years.
And we can start reining it.
Was one question that I spoke with Gary about this previously was the budget cycle last year was totally different than anything we did previously. And was there anything about that budget cycle that people would like to discuss? Because in talking with Gary and talking with Ryan already about this, we'd like to keep it the same. I think it worked out well. Gary thinks it worked out well.
More joint meetings.
I thought that the thing that I liked was the fact that we were presented with the raw budget and then the altered budget. I wanted to know what the delta was, what the financial department and you and the TA had decided to not allow, which I'd never seen before. So that was,
I don't think you never saw it because it was never done that way. What you saw initially, it would have been that negative $1.7 million budget, and it would have been us to bring it down.
Okay.
I think having the TA's office bring that number down to a level funded budget is absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah.
He's the person who runs this building. He should know what these departments have. He's the manager of these things. He should vet these things out. Sorry, Ryan, I'm putting all this pressure.
No, I mean, it's actually one of the few responsibilities in the town code that the town administrator has explicit responsibilities for, which is to present a budget. So it's just following through on town code, really.
So I do want to put on the table that since we don't have a finance director, I'm probably going to be very involved in helping Ryan and Robin, who's the assistant finance director, put together this budget after we agree. So just to put it all on the table.
That's a good thing, man.
Jerry thought.
And then you're on the orchard.
So the only comment I agree that I like the way the budget process worked last year. I wish the 1.7 that was cut out was also in the budget book, because people would come, when they came and presented to us, they talked about what they talked about their goal budget, we'll say, but what was in the budget book didn't reflect that. So if the budget book could say, this is what they asked for, this is what we're funding. So when the presentations came, you could actually see what they were talking about and not.
I think that's more problematic, Mark. I think if we can state it in the presentations that they could focus on the things that didn't come in, I think that might be better, because otherwise it's just extemporaneous and really doesn't add. I mean, I think you can just put it in the presentations and make it explicit to them and say this is what was asked for, and then when they come before you, they're outlining that as part of it. So
my one criticism from last year is when the TA's office got that 1.7 million and they went through it, and I tried to stay out of that. It was Alicia, Ryan, and Anthony that were involved in that. And they brought that budget down. From what I saw is they communicated the cuts to the larger departments. They didn't communicate very well to the smaller departments. So that's why you saw the disconnect. When someone came through and they had talked about something that was actually from the budget already. 9 times out of 10, they really didn't know. Or they found out at the last second.
I think there were a lot of discrepancies.
And I've talked to Ryan about this already.
Okay.
I think that's going to change.
the other thing to keep in mind in terms of the policy guidance, the policy guidance I think was 2% in salary and otherwise level funding. So that in terms of the guidance that was given, guidance was pretty straightforward. So part of it is to staff, don't propose something that shouldn't have been there in the first place too, because it requires discipline in this process, and that really a lot of times and I've seen this in other communities too, it becomes like the Wild West, where people come in and ask for things and without necessarily a sense of what our broader issues are going to be. We're going to be coming into this process with a new teacher contract. The schools have approved of a later start time, which is going to have costs associated with it. And we're about to enter into the negotiations with our 3 unions, police, fire, and DPW. So, this is a serious matter, and I think that, one of the things we keep on emphasizing to staff, and, I'll be probably doing it till I'm blue in the face when we have our meeting with staff, is take this process seriously. If we tell you can't be increasing this, don't be surprised if we come back to you and you're like, oh, shucks, I wish that happened. Like, you shouldn't have put it in there in the first place. So it's,
one of the things
we can have a conversation about it, but it's still.
We're used to is before last year. They never met with the TA to go over their budget. It just wasn't part of the process. And now they're used to that. Now they really going to sit down with Ryan and talk about what we put in there.
That's actually one of the reasons that I like to see what they put in, is because I know, like, in my own job, that's kind of how I kind of gauge the Wild West, if they're being ridiculous or not, so I kind of know who I want to, give more support to as far as where I feel that they're really,
And I think what we're trying to do is just structure that, not necessarily in the document per se, but within when they come and present to you over those nights. They should be talking about those things. It's just to say that it from from a larger perspective in terms of what the finance director and the TA's office has to do, it has to establish a tone, and part of it is to say, like, this is the tone, this is the expectation, and oftentimes what comes back out are some of these other things that are just, that run contrary to that, and so it's either we have a process that people are following, and this is a frustration I have with any year in any municipality. We've done a budget, and it's just like, there's always that pressure. But there are broader pressures that we have with limitations of Proposition 2.5 and what we can reasonably do in any given year. And, we have to live within our means. We owe that
I just
to
remember,
taxpayers.
like LCTV specifically, when they came with theirs, I don't remember what exactly it was, but like the money that they get from other things, they were using to cover stuff and not even bring before us because they were trying so hard to be respectful of what they knew we could do.
Cover their own insurance
And others
costs
were
and
asking
things.
for, all kinds of things. So I just,
And they'll be coming probably back again, Jerry, this year, trying to say, okay, this might be a year that they'd be asking for more of a contribution.
Right.
Because they've
but
used up
knowing
their
that
piggy
they've
bank.
sacrificed, means something.
Right, and that also speaks to the fact that their revenue continues to go down.
We can actually, Brian can actually present, kind of solve your issue before any of the departments come in front of us. You can actually present to us, this was the budget that was
Well, we did
presented, but this is what was not. These are the things we had to cut to get to this. That way,
That was also, that happened as well.
We did have that presentation, it's just when you went to the final document, that original presentation wasn't there, so there was a disconnect between what they were talking about and what you actually had in front of you, so.
Right, but my point here is
I understand
that's not, this document's also to the general public, and so we're trying to, that's something to talk about, I think, later in the stages where they understand it, but at the same time, for the document itself, it has a different audience and different need.
One of the things that I thought also worked very well last year was, we have done this in the past, the two boards, hearing the same message from all the departments. Knowing that we have a balanced budget sitting in front of us, we hear a case from somebody who wants something, we know we need to cut something to get back to that point. I think that's really
At the expense of what?
right, exactly.
a health agent last year, kind of.
Right.
And that is the process we followed. As things continue to evolve in the later stages of that, we tried to open things up and, different things came to us and different decisions had to be made, so.
Okay, so we'll move forward with basically what we did last year. That's the consensus. Good.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved and seconded, all in favor? Aye. Aye. Unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Middleton, from the select board.
And we have
sticking around.
Yeah, we're sticking around a little while. Thank you. Very quick.
Lastly, would you guys like to be at that meeting with all the departments? Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. George Sanders, 672 Great Road. The select board voted to put the CFC 2% on the warrant, right?
Correct.
Now, my position is that Fincom, to me, should have been in sync with the select board and said that they approve of them putting that on there. Now, the policy is a different thing. I think that when you send out the warrant to the resident, then it's not good if they come before the town meeting and say a decision will be made then and there. It means as though that they probably wasn't in sync with the select board putting that on there, and now they have a decision that they're going to make now and tell us at the town meeting. I don't think that's good for Fincom. I think that you should support that, and with your policy being on the 1%,
It's not a decision to put something on the warrant.
now, I know it's not your decision to put that on, but you support, because in the town warrant, you say you for or against
You
whatever
haven't
case
taken that
is.
vote yet.
Yeah.
Neither has the select board.
Huh?
Neither has the select board. They haven't voted to support it or not.
But they supported put it on the warrant.
It's a different thing. yes.
Okay,
It's
so
a different thing.
that's there.
Two different things.
So now we're gonna hear between the two committees as to whether or not it should go forward.
Correct.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, we're still
Minutes.
talking about the budget for 1 second.
Sure, go ahead.
Liaisons. We pick them every year. We say we're going to go to these departments, and then we don't hear anything else. What I'm going to do this year is we're going to assign departments to everyone. We're going to go visit the people, and then we're going to have a meeting where you're going to come and describe the department's budgets and the impacts and the things that they want to see.
So we're actually going to have to do it.
You're actually going to have to do it.
I mean,
Bastard.
Steve, I think it makes sense. I think the only thing we should like we had departments in the past that didn't respond when we reached out and offered help or asked to meet. So I think that's the just support from Ryan or whoever
Absolutely.
to make that happen, right? Because there definitely were.
Let me know, and
Yeah, I
and
have two that don't even respond.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I will make sure that they give you the time.
Yeah, well, we met with,
We met with Chief.
yeah, and that was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
then nobody else heard anything of it.
Oh, we knew.
You-
Yeah. Fair enough, fair enough.
Okay?
Yep.
So next meeting, we'll also pick departments. So if you have favorites, keep them in mind.
Do you want me to send
But
you
I
that?
like that idea because then we come to a meeting and we talk about it. Because I know I've gotten in trouble a few times, like sending out emails to everybody and all that, saying, hey, we spoke to Chief, this is some of the stuff. We can't do that stuff, right?
Right.
So having it on an agenda, good idea.
Yep.
Love it. Yep.
Steve, do you need or want the list from last year, or are you just gonna? I can send it.
Sure, we can use it
All
to
right,
start
I'll
with.
dig it up.
Okay. So it is. Okay, minutes.
Minutes, okay.
Mr. Clerk.
I would-
Okay, so the minutes for March 14th have already been approved. So what my plan is, so we have 5 sets of minutes, and I will write back saying what we, approved or not, whatever. But the March 14th minutes have already been approved. We have the February 20.
March 6th
March
is
6th,
approved.
I think, yeah.
March 6th were approved on the 14th.
So it's
No. I have minutes here, March 14th.
what Marilyn sent out.
Right,
We
yeah.
have January 11th.
Well, what's that about? Let me just, I've got this. So I mean, it's the minutes of March 14th.
Approved them.
If you read them at the bottom, it says we approved March 6th in those minutes.
During that meeting.
Oh, jeez, okay. Fine. Okay, so let's, gotcha, okay. So we need to approve the minutes of March 14th.
Right. Not the
Okay.
6th.
Sorry. Okay, so any comments on the 314 minutes that we've all read? Okay, can I make motions?
Sure, you can make a
Okay,
motion.
Okay, I move that we approve the minutes as written of March 14th, 2023.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So
Okay.
approved.
Approved, okay.
I'm abstaining from all of these since I wasn't a member technically
Oh,
at this
right,
point,
yeah.
so.
Okay, we also have the minutes of Feb 21.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes of February 21st, 2023.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
It's the 21st. Done.
We have January 11.
I make a motion, we approve the minutes of January 11th and July 4th, 2023.
You're so you're wanting to two at once, huh?
I do July 11th, you mean?
Oh, yeah, I can't read my handwriting. Thank you.
January 11th and July 11th.
January 11th and July 11th.
So moved.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So the issue is if you read the bottoms of all these minutes, the last thing we do is approve all the minutes. None of those minutes that were approved have been uploaded to the website. So if anybody has, and Marilyn, I guess, went through all her things, and these are the only minutes she came up with. So if anybody has any electronic minutes that Marilyn sent out beforehand for any of these
I have 'em all.
meetings, could you send them to Brian?
Yeah.
And he can get them to Diane to upload, because there are absolutely no minutes on the town website for the finance
All right,
committee.
all right.
Yeah, I have all of them.
All right,
and
so
everything.
you send those to me, and I will tell Marilyn that we've approved these 5 sets, 3/14, 2/11, January 11th, March 6th, and 7/11, and those, oh, fine, done.
Thank you.
Excellent.
And then whatever
Right,
he can send you, probably
right.
just upload it.
Tuesday evenings still good for everyone?
Yeah,
Okay.
are we meeting next Tuesday then, or in 2 weeks?
2 weeks?
Do we have, just given, do we have the time to go 2 weeks?
With 2 weeks would be the, what's the,
The 5th.
2 weeks to be the 5th.
right after Labor Day? Is that the Tuesday afternoon?
I'm just wondering whether.
Next week's fine with me. If
I'm
we
on
want to do,
vacation next week.
you're on vacation. Okay. 2 weeks, September 5th. Is that good?
Yeah, I'm back. I mean,
Tyler, we
Yeah,
good?
yeah, it should be fine.
Okay, just, well, we gotta have to come to that meeting with our homework. done.
Prepared,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
Absolutely.
7
Okay.
o'clock.
7 o'clock in person here?
Okay. And I will so notify Marilyn that that's,
Thank you.
right, so that's the,
Excellent. Any other business?
So, one thing we should probably post for the next one, Steve, just we still had an opening for like an alternate for TAC. We probably should appoint someone as the primary person for transportation for the TAC subcommittee. Fincom's been kind of
Which committee is this?
I think it's TAC, right? Transportation Advisory Committee or whatever. They've been really struggling with having a quorum.
Who's the rep now?
Me.
You.
They meet at like 5 o'clock during the week. It's been a tough time. To be for sure, we've never had an alternate. So when they changed their meeting time, I haven't been able to attend.
Okay.
in that same vein, somehow not just a rep too, but I'm a member of the CPC, but they
Oh,
meet.
congratulations.
Well, y'all made me that. I thought I was just a rep. Somehow they said, go get sworn in, you're a member, but their meetings are always a conflict for me, just the way it's scheduled. So it's not ideal for me never to be able to go to their meetings. But I can't go to their meetings. So,
Hey, we can discuss that too. CPC rep.
especially because then I often come here and disagree with them, which is not ideal.
When I was on this board, before I went back to work, so this last July or so, I was appointed to the Shaker Lane Building Committee. So we've started to meet. That's going on right now. They're selecting the OPM right now. So a subcommittee got together, I believe it was yesterday, and whittled the list down. And they'll be setting up interviews with the candidates. And it goes before the MSBA in October. So that's kind of like step one of the process. And you have to work around MSBA's schedule basically for all this stuff. So it's going to be a long process before we know anything that happens.
Is Steve Moore or anybody on PNBC in this?
Steve Moore is the chair of and there's one other member that's on the building committee. There's the principal of Shaker Lane is there, Kelly, Ryan, myself.
Okay, that's fine.
And one school committee person.
And so, knowing that you just said we don't know anything yet, but we are, new building likely?
MSBA hasn't decided. It's
They
their
decide-
decision.
They decide whether.
Oh, absolutely.
To give you the
It's their money.
40%, basically, the big
Almost
chunk of
50%.
money, yeah.
50%.
So if they
Or
said,
if you don't want any state money, you can
Do what you want, yeah.
so, okay, but so if they said no,
They said that the best alternative is to rehab the building, and if we want their money, then we
That's what you do.
rehab the building.
okay, okay.
If they say, yes, this building is beyond repair, then they come up with a plan to, well, we come up with a plan to build a new building.
And it was just interesting to hear them say that we might lose one of the Shaker fields.
If there's a new building,
If they
it
put-
probably is put right onto the field that's behind
Well, the
there.
baseball fields.
Yep. In which case, then you rip down Shaker Lane, you put a field there.
Wouldn't get much of a field there.
Depends how far back it is. I did do the walkthrough at the OPMs. Chuck was on the committee also. The first time I'd been in Shaker Lane for quite a while. And it is old and tired and very cramped. So I wouldn't doubt if it's not a new building.
Well, we used to, as a Fincom, once a year, with the superintendent and local principals, actually do a walk-around. Back when we were basically the facilities committee. And, you know, we used to do that just to get some feeling as to what kinds of projects and money and whatnot they were asking for, but we haven't done that for years and years and years.
Well, I think even going back to the forced meetings. I mean, I think that's a good thing, right? I feel the new budget process. We're getting more disconnected by the year, right? So I think we need to get back back to that. I miss it. Do we know if the town moderator is on his radar to appoint a new member? Is that anything happen with that?
I know he's been looking and he can't find anybody.
Really?
Yeah.
Jeez.
And I've asked 2 or 3 people, we asked somebody today, no bites.
I've asked some people and they're like, I don't know.
Wow, it's so different.
Yeah. The school department has advertised for your slot.
Oh, I know.
They haven't gotten anything.
Shocking.
Is there any kind of place that has like a record of all of the town-owned properties? I mean, like I went onto the, assessor's map, and it's just hard because like some are owned, will be Conservation Trust, some are Park and Rec, some are, they're all different names, but I'm just, thinking about not having a facilities manager. Is there any one place that kind of tracks all of those parcels? Because I don't know, I can't help but feel like over the years we've acquired pieces that maybe have no value to us or we don't want, and yet, and then I think of like the orchard that, not being cared for costs so much more money, and trying to think of a way to pay for Indian Hill if there's not things like that. I know we want open space and we're trying to buy land, but is there maybe parcels that are
There's
not things that we want, and who kind of tracks all of that?
So when I was treasurer, part of the job was keeping track of those parcels, basically.
Okay.
And I used to take the assessor's map and actually color code them
Okay.
and say, okay, so I knew by looking at one of the maps, Conservation Trust owned this, Conservation Commission owned this,
Yeah.
the town owned this, schools own that. There's a lot of parcels that the town has taken over the years that conservation wants and doesn't let go of, basically. And they won't let the town sell it, basically. So there's a lot of parcels around the lake area that they own, or the town owns, that are vacant.
And the select board used to have a, once every couple of years, they would sell off some, but it was always a sort of weird process.
There's a forget the exact title of our, but it's smaller lots in town
abutters.
that the town has, a butters program,
Yeah.
thank you. The butters program. We actually stole it from Fall River. You pay $1 a square foot, basically. And you have to be a direct abutter. So as we used to take parcels in tax title, and they fit that program, we would bring the parcel to town meeting. Town meeting would approve entry into the program, and then we would get in touch with the abutters to see if they wanted to purchase that. We've sold 5 or 6 of them over the years.
The funny thing is, though, near my house, one of my neighbors abuts a town-owned, tax title taken property and has gone to select board over the years, desperate to buy it, and select board won't. And so it's like, so that's where it's like, what's the policy?
If it's a larger, they control it. They're the land stewards of the
Right.
town, so if it's not in the program, then it's their decision. It still has to go through an open process. If they decide that the person, they want to sell it, they have to advertise it. So anybody can come in and purchase it.
Right.
Not just that, they can't sell it to a person.
Right. Right.
It's
I
their
think-
decision.
I just think this abutter would like the opportunity to try to bid or whatever for it.
I can call Gary.
At 2 a.m. No.
Okay, anything else? Who's the rep on the TA? Are you on the TA committee?
Yes.
Have you guys met?
We've posted the job. It was posted last week. We're hoping we're going to get some candidates in. We're going to review them. What we did this time is we broke up all the different department heads and committee heads, and we all had interviews with them to see what they wanted. So what do you guys want in a town administrator going forward? We pulled that all together. Michelle pulled it all into a one-pager and sent it out to the group. So hopefully we'll get some candidates in soon, but she posted it in a bunch of places. So we'll see how this plays out.
Is it possible, I mean, it seems like Ryan become the administrator and then we hire an assistant. Is that even possible?
So we don't have any resumes in yet. I'm assuming Ryan's going to put his name in the mix.
Okay, so then we might,
It's bylaw, that this whole process that they're going through is part of the bylaw right now, so
Okay.
they have to do this.
okay, so,
We're going to get it down to 2, maybe 3. We're still debating on the number. All the resumes are going to come in. We're going to put them into 3 buckets. Very good qualifications, possibly good, no, right? So we're going to have them into the 3 buckets, and then out of the ones that we go through, we're going to try to bring in at least 2, maybe 3 people to interview, and then our committee, I believe the process is our committee recommends then for the select board, because the select board actually does their hiring.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, so we'll recommend out of those 2 to 3, who's going to go to the select board to.
so it's, one could imagine a possible scenario being that Ryan ends up becoming the TA and then we start the process all over again for an ATA.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a finance director.
Finance director.
And a finance director, yeah.
And a health director and a treasurer and everything else. Okay. All right.
Okay, anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
So moved.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.